In the quiet spaces between what we know and what we cannot fathom, mysteries dwell like shadows at twilight. Through centuries of human endeavor, brilliant minds have reached toward understanding. Yet some phenomena slip through their grasp, like moonbeams through water. These are the events that make scientists pause, that cause the rational to wonder, that remind us the universe holds secrets deeper than our instruments can measure. Tonight, as sleep beckons and consciousness softens, let these unexplained moments from history wash over you, not as puzzles to solve, but as reminders that wonder still lives in our world. Here, in the gentle darkness, the impossible becomes possible, and the mysterious becomes a lullaby for the dreaming mind. If this journey into history's mysteries gently moves you, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. It helps more. Sleepy minds find their way here. By the way, where in the world are you listening from? What time is it where you are? Drop a comment before you drift off. We read every single one. In the summer of 1518, when the Rhine Valley shimmered with heat and the cobblestones of Strasbourg radiated warmth like buried coals, something extraordinary began with a single woman's steps. Frau Troffea emerged from her half-timbered house on a morning that seemed no different from any other, yet within moments she would set in motion one of history's most perplexing medical mysteries. The morning mist had barely lifted from the river when neighbors first noticed her dancing. Not the careful, measured steps of a festival celebration, but a frenzied, continuous movement that seemed to possess her very soul. Her feet moved without pause, her arms swayed with an urgency that defied explanation, and her eyes held a distant look as if she gazed into a world only she could see. Hours passed, and still she danced. The sun climbed higher, casting longer shadows across the marketplace where curious onlookers gathered. Children peered from behind their mothers' skirts, merchants paused in their bargaining, and even the priests emerged from morning prayers to witness this strange spectacle. Frau Troffea's husband pleaded with her to stop, grasping her arms, but she twisted free and continued her relentless rhythm. By evening, her shoes had worn through, and blood stained the stones beneath her feet. Still she could not stop. The dancing had taken hold of her like a fever, and no amount of reasoning, pleading, or physical restraint could break its grip. The townspeople watched in growing alarm as this respectable woman, known for her quiet demeanor and regular attendance at church, transformed before their eyes into something wild and untamable. The physicians who examined her could find no physical ailment. Her heart beat strong, her breathing remained steady despite the exertion, and her body showed no signs of disease. Yet the dancing continued through the night, her movements growing more erratic as exhaustion set in, but never ceasing entirely. It was as if some invisible force had wound her like a clockwork toy and refused to let the spring uncoil. On the second day, something even more disturbing occurred, as crowds gathered again to witness Frau Troffea's continued dance. A baker's wife suddenly burst from the watching throng and began to dance beside her. Then a young man joined them, his feet moving in the same frenzied pattern. By noon, a dozen people danced in the square, their individual movements somehow synchronized, as if they heard music that existed only in their minds. The local authorities, faced with a situation beyond their understanding, consulted both medical doctors and religious leaders. The physicians spoke of corrupted blood and imbalanced humors, prescribing bleeding and purging that brought no relief. The clergy declared it divine punishment for the town's sins, organizing prayer vigils and calling for repentance. Yet still, the dancers danced, their numbers growing with each passing hour. By the end of the first week, nearly 30 people moved in the endless dance. They came from all walks of life, merchants and servants, mothers and maidens, the young and the old. Social barriers dissolved in the shared rhythm of their affliction. Families tried desperately to care for their dancing relatives, bringing them food and water, binding their bloodied feet, yet nothing could stop the movement. The dancers themselves seemed caught between consciousness and dream. Some appeared lucid, tears streaming down their faces as they begged for help between gasping breaths. Others moved as if sleepwalking, their eyes unfocused, responding neither to their names nor to physical contact. A few laughed maniacally as they danced, their joy twisted into something unsettling and strange. Medical authorities from neighboring regions arrived to study the phenomenon. They brought with them the latest understanding of human anatomy and disease, yet found themselves as baffled as the local physicians. The dancers showed signs of extreme physical exhaustion. Their muscles should have given out days earlier, yet somehow they continued. It was as if their bodies had been disconnected from the normal laws of fatigue and endurance. Stranger still, attempts to physically restrain the dancers often proved futile. They possessed an unusual strength, breaking free from bonds and continuing their movement with renewed vigor. Some observers noted that the dancers seemed to move in patterns that resembled ancient ritual dances, though none could identify their origin or meaning. The rhythm seemed to come from somewhere deep within, as if their bodies remembered steps their minds had never learned. As news of the dancing plague spread throughout the Holy Roman Empire, scholars and physicians traveled from distant universities to witness the phenomenon firsthand. They documented everything they saw, creating detailed accounts that would puzzle future generations. Some theorized about ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, others suggested mass hysteria or supernatural influence. None could provide a satisfactory explanation for what they observed. The city council, desperate for solutions, decided to follow the advice of physicians who believed the dancers needed to dance out their affliction. They hired musicians and built a stage in the main square, reasoning that proper music and a designated space might help the dancers exhaust whatever force compelled them. The plan, born of medieval medical theory, would prove catastrophically wrong. When the musicians began to play, the effect was immediate and horrifying. Instead of providing relief, the music seemed to amplify the dancers' frenzy. Their movements became more violent, their expressions more ecstatic, and, most disturbing of all, more people began to join them. The sound of drums and flutes acted like a magnet, drawing others into the dance against their will. By the height of the outbreak, historical records suggest that as many as 400 people may have been dancing simultaneously. The city's normal life ground to a halt as a significant portion of the population became consumed by the inexplicable compulsion. Markets closed, church services were disrupted, and families were torn apart by the strange affliction that seemed to spread through mere observation. The dancers began to collapse from exhaustion, yet even those who fell continued to move their arms and legs in the dancing rhythm. Some never rose again, their hearts apparently giving out from the prolonged exertion. Death certificates from the period record unusual causes of mortality, with physicians struggling to categorize what killed those who literally danced themselves to death. Those who survived the worst days of their affliction described the experience in fragmentary, often contradictory ways. Some spoke of feeling weightless, as if their feet barely touched the ground. Others described hearing celestial music that seemed to flow through their bodies like liquid light. A few claimed to have seen visions of saints or angels encouraging their movement, while others recalled only darkness and an overwhelming compulsion they could not resist. The religious authorities, initially viewing the plague as divine punishment, began to shift their interpretation as the crisis deepened. Some clergy suggested it might be a form of religious ecstasy, perhaps similar to the dancing manias that had occasionally swept through medieval monasteries. They organized pilgrimages to nearby shrines, hoping that divine intervention might succeed where medicine had failed. Interestingly, these religious processions seemed to provide some relief. When dancers were carried to the shrine of Saint Vitus, patron saint of dancers and epileptics, many reported a gradual lessening of their compulsion. Whether this represented actual divine intervention, the power of suggestion, or simply the natural course of the affliction remains a mystery that science has never satisfactorily resolved. As autumn approached and the initial outbreak had lasted nearly 2 months, the dancing plague began to subside as mysteriously as it had started. The last dancers gradually stopped moving, collapsing in exhaustion, but finally free from their compulsion. The city of Strasbourg slowly returned to normal life, though the trauma of those summer months would echo through local memory for generations. Modern medical science has proposed numerous explanations for the dancing plague of 1518. Some researchers suggest ergot poisoning from contaminated rye, pointing to the psychoactive properties of the fungus that can cause hallucinations and convulsions. Others favor theories of mass psychogenic illness, a form of collective hysteria that can manifest physical symptoms in groups under extreme stress. The ergot theory, while appealing in its scientific rationality, faces significant challenges. The symptoms described by witnesses don't perfectly match ergot poisoning, which typically causes more varied neurological effects. Moreover, the selective nature of the affliction, why it affected some people and not others who presumably ate from the same grain supplies, remains difficult to explain through this mechanism alone. Mass hysteria offers another compelling explanation, particularly given the social and economic stresses facing Strasbourg in 1518. The city was dealing with disease, famine, and political uncertainty, conditions known to predispose communities to collective psychological phenomena. The contagious nature of the dancing, spreading through observation and suggestion, fits well with documented cases of hysteria in other historical periods. Yet even the hysteria theory struggles to explain certain aspects of the Strasbourg outbreak. The physical endurance displayed by the dancers, their ability to continue moving for days beyond normal human limits, suggests something more than purely psychological influence. The synchronized nature of their movements, as if responding to unheard music, adds another layer of mystery that defies easy categorization. Some researchers have explored the possibility of ritualistic or cultural factors contributing to the outbreak. Medieval Europe preserved many folk traditions with roots in pre-Christian religions, some involving ecstatic dancing as a form of spiritual practice. Perhaps the dancing plague represented a resurgence of these ancient practices, triggered by the social upheaval of the early 16th century. The role of St. Vitus in both causing and potentially curing dancing manias adds another intriguing dimension to the mystery. St. Vitus was associated with both protection from and infliction of involuntary movement. Medieval people believed that failing to properly honor the saint could result in his dance as punishment, while his blessing could provide relief from such afflictions. Archaeological evidence suggests that the area around Strasbourg had been a site of ritual dancing in pre-Roman times. Stone circles and other ancient structures in the region may have hosted seasonal celebrations involving communal dance. Could some deep cultural memory have been awakened in 1518, manifesting through the collective unconscious of the city's population? The dancing plague of Strasbourg was not an isolated incident. Similar outbreaks occurred throughout medieval Europe, with documented cases in Germany, France, and the Low Countries. Each followed roughly the same pattern, beginning with one or a few individuals, spreading through communities via apparent contagion, and eventually subsiding after weeks or months of inexplicable dancing. What makes the 1518 outbreak particularly significant is the quality of documentation surrounding it. Unlike earlier incidents, which survive only in fragmentary chronicles, the Strasbourg plague was witnessed and recorded by educated observers including physicians, clergy, and civic officials. Their detailed accounts provide a window into one of history's most puzzling medical mysteries. The aftermath of the dancing plague left lasting marks on Strasbourg's collective memory. City officials implemented new regulations regarding public gatherings and entertainment, apparently fearing a recurrence of the outbreak. The local church commissioned special prayers and rituals designed to prevent future dancing manias, treating the event as both medical crisis and spiritual warning. Families affected by the plague struggled with the aftermath in different ways. Some treated their formerly dancing relatives as survivors of a terrible illness, providing gentle care as they recovered their strength. Others viewed them with suspicion or fear, wondering if the compulsion might return. A few families relocated entirely, seeking fresh starts in communities where their experience would not mark them as different or cursed. The medical profession was forced to confront the limitations of its understanding. The dancing plague challenged every existing theory about disease and human behavior, leading some physicians to expand their studies beyond purely physical causes. This may have contributed to the gradual emergence of more holistic approaches to medicine that considered psychological and social factors in illness. Modern neuroscience has identified brain regions and chemical pathways involved in compulsive movement disorders, yet none fully explain the dancing plague's characteristics. Conditions like Huntington's disease or certain forms of epilepsy can cause involuntary movement, but they don't account for the contagious nature of the Strasbourg outbreak or its sudden onset and resolution. Recent research into mirror neurons, brain cells that fire both when performing an action and when observing others perform the same action, offers intriguing possibilities for understanding how movement might spread through a population. These neurons play crucial roles in empathy and imitation, potentially providing a neurological mechanism for the apparent contagion of dancing behavior. The role of music and rhythm in human neurology adds another layer to consider. The brain's response to rhythmic stimuli involves multiple neural networks, some of which can override conscious control of movement. Perhaps the dancers of Strasbourg became entrapped in self-generating rhythmic loops, their brains unable to break free from patterns that began with Frau Trofea's first steps. Environmental factors may also have played a role in creating conditions conducive to the outbreak. The summer of 1518 was unusually hot and humid, potentially affecting brain chemistry and psychological state. Combined with social stresses and poor nutrition from recent famines, the population may have been particularly vulnerable to unusual neurological phenomena. Sleep deprivation, common in the stressed population of early 16th century Strasbourg, can cause hallucinations and impaired judgment that might have contributed to the spread of the dancing compulsion. When normal sleep patterns are disrupted, the brain's ability to distinguish between reality and imagination becomes compromised, potentially making individuals more susceptible to suggestion and mass phenomena. The seasonal timing of the outbreak, beginning in midsummer, may also be significant. Many cultures associate summer festivals with communal dancing and celebration, and the body's circadian rhythms undergo changes during periods of maximum daylight. Perhaps these natural factors combined with social stresses to create a perfect storm for the emergence of the dancing plague. Whatever its ultimate cause, the dancing plague of 1518 remains one of history's most compelling medical mysteries. It challenges our understanding of the relationship between mind and body, individual and community, conscious will and unconscious compulsion. In an age of advanced neuroscience and sophisticated medical imaging, we might expect to have solved such mysteries, yet they continue to elude complete explanation. The story of Frau Trofea and her unwilling companions in dance serves as a humbling reminder that human consciousness and behavior contain depths we have yet to fathom. Their experience speaks to the profound interconnectedness of human beings, the power of suggestion and social influence, and the delicate balance that maintains our everyday sense of control over our own bodies. As you drift towards sleep tonight, perhaps you can imagine the cobblestone square of 16th century Strasbourg, where ordinary people found themselves caught in an extraordinary mystery. Their dance has ended, but the questions it raised continue to echo through the centuries, reminding us that in the space between sleeping and waking, between the known and unknown, mysteries still wait to be discovered. In the high desert of New Mexico, where the Sangre de Cristo mountains cast purple shadows across ancient Pueblo lands, a mystery has hummed quietly for decades. The small town of Taos, population barely 5,000, sits at an elevation where the air grows thin and sound carries differently than in the lowlands. Here, surrounded by sagebrush and juniper, some residents have reported hearing a persistent, low-frequency sound that others cannot detect, a phenomenon that has attracted scientists, skeptics, and the curious from around the world. The Taos Hum, as it came to be known, first gained widespread attention in the early 1990s, though residents had been reporting the mysterious sound for years before that. Those who hear it describe a low, persistent tone, sometimes compared to the idle of a distant diesel engine or the droning of a far-off airplane that never quite passes overhead. Unlike clearly identifiable sounds, the hum seems to come from everywhere and nowhere, pulsing gently through the consciousness of those sensitive to its frequency. Not everyone in Taos can hear the hum. Studies suggest that only about 2% of the population experiences the phenomenon, leading to a peculiar division within the community. Those who hear it often become intensely focused on its presence, describing how it disrupts their sleep, affects their concentration, and creates a constant background to their daily lives. Those who cannot hear it sometimes question whether the phenomenon exists at all, adding a layer of social tension to the scientific mystery. The characteristics of the hum vary slightly among those who report it. Some describe a steady tone, while others detect subtle fluctuations or pulsing patterns. The frequency typically falls in the range of 30 to 80 Hz, low enough to feel, as much as hear, residing in that liminal space where sound becomes physical sensation. Many hearers report that the hum is more noticeable at night, in quiet indoor spaces, and seems to be blocked by certain types of background noise. Joe Mullins, a retired engineer who moved to Taos in the late 1980s, became one of the most vocal advocates for investigating the phenomenon. His background in acoustics and electronics made him particularly sensitive to unusual sounds, and he quickly noticed the persistent low-frequency tone that seemed to permeate his new home. Mullins began documenting his experiences and reaching out to other residents, discovering that many had noticed the same mysterious sound, but had assumed they were alone in hearing it. The astronomers of ancient Babylon worked through countless nights, their clay tablets filling with calculations that would confound modern mathematicians. They tracked celestial bodies with a precision that seems impossible for their time, predicting eclipses thousands of years into the future with an accuracy that rivals contemporary computer models. Yet when archaeologists examine these tablets today, they find mathematical concepts and astronomical knowledge that these ancient peoples should not have possessed, according to our understanding of historical technological development. In the quiet chambers of the British Museum, where these tablets rest behind glass cases, scholars continue to puzzle over the Babylonian ephemeris tables. These documents contain calculations for planetary positions that demonstrate knowledge of complex mathematical relationships. The Babylonians understood that planetary motion could be described using geometric progressions and arithmetic sequences, concepts that European mathematics would not rediscover until the Renaissance. They calculated the synodic periods of planets, the time it takes for a planet to return to the same position relative to Earth and the Sun, with stunning accuracy. The mystery deepens when researchers examine the Mull-Appin Astronomical Compendium, a collection of star catalogues and mathematical procedures dating to around 700 BCE. This text reveals that Babylonian astronomers possessed detailed knowledge of the heliacal risings of stars, the precession of equinoxes, and the complex motions of the moon that would challenge astronomers for millennia. They created mathematical models that could predict lunar eclipses with precision, yet the underlying theoretical framework for these calculations remains largely opaque to modern analysis. Dr. Mathieu Ossendriver of Humboldt University made a startling discovery in 2016 when he deciphered several previously untranslated cuneiform tablets from between 350 and 50 BCE. These tablets revealed that Babylonian astronomers were using sophisticated geometric methods to calculate the position of Jupiter, employing techniques that wouldn't appear in European astronomy until the 14th century. They had developed what amounts to an early form of calculus, using geometric figures to calculate areas under curves that represented planetary velocity over time. The implications stretch far beyond mere mathematical curiosity. These calculations required not just advanced mathematical thinking, but also centuries of precise observational data. The Babylonians must have maintained continuous astronomical records for generations, passing down increasingly refined measurements and calculations through their priestly schools. Yet the origins of this mathematical sophistication remain mysterious. There appears to be no gradual development from simpler to more complex mathematical concepts. Instead, these advanced techniques seem to emerge fully formed in the historical record. High in the Bolivian Andes, at an altitude where the thin air makes every breath a conscious effort, lies one of archaeology's most perplexing sites. Puma Punku, part of the larger Tiwanaku complex, challenges our understanding of ancient construction capabilities with a precision that seems to mock the limitations of its supposed time period. The massive stone blocks scattered across this windswept plateau bear the marks of machining techniques that modern engineers struggle to explain. The stones themselves tell a story that conventional archaeology finds difficult to narrate. These aren't crude megalithic monuments hewn with primitive tools. Instead, they display precision-cut angles, perfectly smooth surfaces, and interlocking joints that require tolerances measured in millimeters. The largest blocks, weighing over 130 tons, were somehow transported across difficult terrain and lifted into position with an accuracy that would challenge modern construction equipment. Archaeological engineer Christopher Dunn has spent decades analyzing the tool marks and surface finishes on these stones. His measurements reveal cut angles accurate to within minutes of arc, surface finishes that appear to have been achieved through machine grinding, and drill holes that show signs of high-speed rotation, with feed rates consistent with modern diamond-tipped tools. The granite and basalt blocks display characteristics that Dunn argues could only be achieved through advanced machining techniques. Yet they date to a period when the available technology was supposedly limited to copper and stone tools. The mystery extends beyond mere construction techniques to questions of design and planning. The stones at Puma Punku were shaped to fit together in complex three-dimensional puzzles, with channels and locks that required precise understanding of engineering principles. Some blocks feature H-shaped cuts that appear designed to accommodate metal clamps or joining devices, yet no evidence of such hardware has been found. The precision of these cuts suggests a master plan executed with mathematical precision across hundreds of individual stone elements. Dr. Alexey Vranich of the University of Pennsylvania has led extensive archaeological investigations at the site, employing ground-penetrating radar, 3D modeling, and detailed photogrammetry to understand the original configuration of the complex. His work has revealed that the scattered stones once formed elaborate ceremonial platforms and buildings whose architecture displays sophisticated understanding of structural engineering. The foundation systems show evidence of advanced drainage techniques and seismic resistance features that protected the structures for over 1,000 years. What makes Puma Punku particularly enigmatic is not just the precision of individual stones, but the overall organizational complexity that the construction would have required. The varying types of stone came from different quarry sites, some located hundreds of kilometers away. The logistics of transporting, shaping, and assembling these materials would have demanded coordinated effort across vast distances, sophisticated planning capabilities, and construction techniques that leave no archaeological trace. Geologist Robert Schoch has analyzed the weathering patterns on the stones and argues that some show evidence of much greater antiquity than traditionally accepted. His studies of precipitation-induced erosion suggest that certain structures at the site may have been exposed to rainfall patterns that ended over 10,000 years ago, pushing back their potential construction date to a period when the high-altitude location would have had a dramatically different climate. The acoustic properties of the remaining structures add another layer to the mystery. Researchers have discovered that the stone platforms produce distinct resonant frequencies when struck, with different areas of the complex generating specific tonal responses. Some investigators suggest that these acoustic characteristics were intentionally designed, though the purpose of such engineering remains unclear. The mathematical relationships between these frequencies mirror those found in ancient musical scales, hinting at sophisticated understanding of harmonic principles. In the archives of the British Meteorological Office, filed away among routine weather observations and atmospheric measurements, lies a collection of reports that defies easy categorization. These documents, spanning nearly 2 centuries, describe aerial phenomena that trained observers witnessed but could not explain. Lights that behaved in ways that challenged the accepted physics of their time and continue to puzzle scientists today. The phenomenon known as ball lightning represents one of science's most persistent enigmas. Unlike the familiar zigzag discharge of regular lightning, these mysterious orbs of luminous plasma appear as self-contained spheres of light that float through the air with apparent purpose and intelligence. They have been observed passing through windows without breaking glass, following metal conductors like curious animals, and persisting for minutes rather than the microseconds typical of electrical discharges. Dr. John Abrahamson of the University of Canterbury has spent decades collecting eyewitness accounts and attempting to recreate ball lightning in laboratory conditions. His research has documented cases where these luminous spheres appeared during thunderstorms but behaved in ways that conventional electrical theory cannot explain. Witnesses described them rolling along the ground, hovering in mid-air, and even appearing inside aircraft and submarines. Some reports detail ball lightning that seem to respond to human presence, approaching people before suddenly vanishing or exploding with tremendous force. The scientific challenge lies not just in explaining how ball lightning forms, but in understanding how it maintains its structure and energy for extended periods. Conventional plasma physics suggests that such formations should dissipate almost immediately in normal atmospheric conditions. Yet credible witnesses, including trained scientists and pilots, have observed these phenomena persisting for minutes while maintaining their spherical shape and luminosity. One of the most detailed scientific observations occurred in 1963 when Dr. R.C. Jennison of the Electronics Laboratory at the University of Kent encountered ball lightning during a commercial flight. As their airliner flew through a thunderstorm, a glowing sphere approximately 8 inches in diameter appeared in the passenger cabin. Dr. Jennison watched as the ball traveled down the aisle at a steady pace, maintaining its brightness and shape for several seconds before disappearing without sound or explosion. His detailed scientific report provided one of the most credible eyewitness accounts in the scientific literature. The mystery deepened in 2012 when Chinese researchers, using high-speed cameras to study conventional lightning, accidentally captured the first detailed video footage of ball lightning in nature. The recording showed a luminous sphere approximately 5 meters in diameter that appeared after a lightning strike and persisted for over a second while moving horizontally across the landscape. Spectroscopic analysis of the light revealed the presence of silicon, iron, and calcium, elements present in the local soil, suggesting that ball lightning might somehow incorporate terrestrial materials into its structure. Laboratory attempts to recreate ball lightning have produced intriguing but incomplete results. Russian physicist Pyotr Kapitsa proposed that ball lightning might be sustained by radio-frequency electromagnetic radiation, while others have suggested that it could result from silicon nanoparticles created by lightning strikes oxidizing in air. Researchers have created brief, luminous plasma formations using various techniques, but none have achieved the longevity and stability of natural ball lightning. The phenomenon becomes even more mysterious when examined through historical accounts. Medieval chronicles contain descriptions of flying dragons and fire devils that match modern ball lightning reports in remarkable detail. During the Renaissance, scientific observers like Georgius Agricola documented encounters with mysterious lights in mines and during storms. These historical accounts suggest that ball lightning has been occurring consistently throughout human history, yet science remains unable to fully explain its nature. Contemporary research has revealed that ball lightning might be more common than previously thought. Dr. Antonio F. Rañada of the Universidad Complutense Madrid has proposed that ball lightning could be a form of electromagnetic knot, a stable configuration of twisted magnetic field lines that could theoretically persist in plasma. His mathematical models suggest that these structures could maintain their coherence through topological properties that protect them from dissipation. The implications extend beyond academic curiosity. Understanding ball lightning could provide insights into plasma physics that might revolutionize energy storage and transmission technologies. Some researchers speculate that the phenomenon might offer clues to achieving controlled fusion reactions or developing new forms of electromagnetic propulsion. Yet despite decades of study and increasingly sophisticated instruments, ball lightning continues to appear unpredictably and vanish before detailed measurements can be completed. in the depths of ancient caves scattered across the world, where darkness has reigned for millennia and silence wraps around visitors like a physical presence, lie formations that challenge our understanding of how memory and information can be stored in nature. These are not the simple stalactites and stalagmites that tourists admire, but complex crystalline structures that appear to contain encoded information, patterns that some researchers believe may preserve records of Earth's distant past in ways that science is only beginning to comprehend. The phenomenon first gained scientific attention in the 1960s when speleologists exploring deep cave systems began noticing unusual crystal formations that displayed geometric patterns too complex and regular to be explained by normal geological processes. These crystals, primarily composed of quartz and calcite, exhibited internal structures that resembled nothing so much as three-dimensional data storage systems, with layers upon layers of microscopic inclusions arranged in precise mathematical relationships. Dr. Robert Hazen of the Carnegie Institution for Science has studied these formations extensively, employing electron microscopy and X-ray crystallography to analyze their internal structure. His research has revealed that some cave crystals contain microscopic inclusions arranged in patterns that appear to encode information about the environmental conditions present during their formation. These inclusions act like tiny time capsules, preserving records of ancient atmospheric compositions, temperature fluctuations, and even seismic activity spanning thousands of years. The most intriguing discoveries have come from caves in Mexico's Nica mine, where enormous crystals reaching lengths of over 30 feet have grown in chambers deep beneath the Earth's surface. These selenite crystals formed over hundreds of thousands of years in mineral-rich hydrothermal solutions, and their internal structure reveals layer upon layer of growth bands that chronicle Earth's geological history with unprecedented detail. When scientists analyze thin sections of these crystals under polarized light, they reveal complex internal patterns that some researchers compare to the data storage capacity of modern computer memory systems. Dr. Penelope Boston, an astrobiologist who has spent her career studying extreme environments, made a startling discovery while analyzing fluid inclusions within these giant crystals. Using advanced microscopy techniques, she found that some inclusions contained what appeared to be preserved microorganisms, bacteria and archaea that had been trapped within the crystal matrix for potentially 50,000 years. When her team carefully extracted and cultured these organisms, they found that some were still viable, suggesting that the crystals had somehow maintained the biological integrity of these ancient life forms. The implications of these discoveries extend far beyond basic geology. If crystals can preserve biological material for tens of thousands of years while maintaining its viability, they might serve as natural libraries containing information about Earth's biological and environmental history. Some researchers have begun to investigate whether the geometric patterns within cave crystals might represent a form of natural information storage that could be decoded to reveal details about past climate conditions, atmospheric compositions, and even biological evolution. The mystery deepens when researchers examine crystals found in archaeological contexts. Ancient civilizations, from the Maya to the Egyptians, incorporated crystals into their most sacred structures and burial chambers. These crystals often display internal patterns that seem too complex to be natural formations, leading some researchers to speculate that ancient peoples might have discovered ways to encode information into crystal structures using techniques that modern science doesn't understand. Professor Marcel Vogel, a former IBM researcher who became fascinated by crystal properties, conducted extensive experiments on how crystals respond to electromagnetic fields and mechanical stress. His work suggested that quartz crystals could be influenced by focused intention and electromagnetic fields in ways that produced measurable changes in their internal structure. While controversial, his research indicated that crystals might be capable of storing and retrieving information in ways that conventional physics doesn't fully explain. Contemporary research using quantum mechanical principles has begun to shed light on how crystals might function as information storage systems. Dr. Lloyd Seth of the Massachusetts Institute of Technology has calculated that the quantum states of atoms within crystal lattices could theoretically store vast amounts of information in configurations that remain stable over geological time periods. His work suggests that crystals might naturally function as quantum computers, processing and storing information through quantum entanglement and superposition effects. The practical applications of this research could revolutionize information technology. If scientists can understand how natural crystals encode and preserve information over long time periods, it might be possible to develop storage systems that far exceed the capacity and longevity of current digital technologies. Some researchers are already experimenting with synthetic crystals designed to store digital information in three-dimensional matrix structures that could preserve data for millions of years. Deep within the cave systems of Romania's Carpathian Mountains, researchers have discovered crystal formations that display particularly complex internal structures. These crystals, formed in caves that have been sealed from the surface for millions of years, contain inclusion patterns that seem to reflect the seismic history of the region with extraordinary precision. Each layer records not just the timing of earthquakes, but also their magnitude and direction, creating a geological memory system that extends far beyond human historical records. The acoustic properties of these crystals add another dimension to their mystery. When subjected to specific frequencies of sound or electromagnetic radiation, cave crystals produce resonant responses that vary according to their internal structure. Some researchers have found that crystals with more complex inclusion patterns generate more sophisticated acoustic signatures, suggesting that their internal organization influences their vibrational characteristics in measurable ways. In the hushed reading rooms of ancient libraries, where dust motes dance through shafts of filtered sunlight and the scent of old parchment fills the air, cartographers and historians continue to grapple with maps that seem to know too much about the world. These mysterious charts, drawn centuries before the supposed discovery of various continents and geographic features, display knowledge that challenges our understanding of historical exploration and raises profound questions about how information traveled across time and space in the ancient world. The most famous of these enigmatic documents is the Piri Reis map, created in 1513 by the Ottoman admiral and cartographer Piri ibn Haji Mehmed. This map, drawn on gazelle skin and discovered in 1929 in the archives of Istanbul's Topkapi Palace, shows the Atlantic Ocean with remarkable accuracy, including detailed coastlines of South America and what appears to be the northern coast of Antarctica. The problematic detail is that Antarctica wasn't officially discovered until 1820, and the coastline depicted on the map shows the continent as it would appear beneath its ice sheet, a feature that modern science only mapped using seismic technology in the 20th century. Professor Charles Hapgood of Keene College spent decades analyzing the Piri Reis map and other anomalous charts, developing theories about ancient maritime knowledge that conventional history cannot easily explain. His research, conducted in collaboration with the United States Air Force, involved detailed comparisons between the historical maps and modern satellite imagery. The results were startling. The ancient maps displayed longitude calculations that required knowledge of Earth's circumference and sophisticated timekeeping methods that weren't supposedly available to their creators. The Piri Reis map contains annotations in Ottoman Turkish that provide clues about its sources. Piri Reis wrote that he compiled his chart from over 20 source maps, some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, and others captured from Spanish explorers. He claimed that one source map had been used by Christopher Columbus himself, suggesting a tradition of geographic knowledge that predated the age of exploration by centuries or even millennia. Dr. Gregory McIntosh, a historian specializing in early cartography, has conducted extensive analysis of the mathematical projections used in these ancient maps. His research reveals that many of them employ sophisticated projection techniques that require advanced understanding of spherical geometry and trigonometry. The Piri Reis map, for instance, appears to use a type of azimuthal projection centered on Cairo, Egypt, that accurately represents distances and directions from that point across vast oceanic distances. The mystery extends beyond individual maps to entire cartographic traditions that seem to possess impossible knowledge. The Orontius Phoneus map of 1531 shows Antarctica as an ice-free continent with mountain ranges and river systems that correspond remarkably well to the actual topography hidden beneath the ice sheet. The Mercator map of 1569 includes similar details, suggesting that multiple cartographers had access to source materials containing accurate information about Antarctic geography. Modern analysis using computer modeling and satellite data has revealed that these maps would be accurate if Antarctica had been mapped during a period when global sea levels were much lower and the continent was largely ice-free. Geological evidence suggests that such conditions last existed over 6,000 years ago, during the end of the last ice age. This creates a chronological puzzle. How did medieval and Renaissance cartographers possess information that could only have been gathered during prehistoric times? The phenomenon isn't limited to Antarctica. The Dulcet Portolan chart of 1339 shows the Mediterranean and Black Sea regions with accuracy that wasn't supposedly achieved until the development of modern surveying techniques. The coastlines are depicted with precision that requires detailed knowledge of longitude, yet the mathematical tools for calculating longitude at sea weren't developed until the 18th century with the invention of the marine chronometer. Professor Emeritus Livio Catulo Stecchini of Harvard University conducted extensive mathematical analysis of ancient maps and concluded that many were based on geodetic surveys of remarkable sophistication. His research suggested that ancient civilizations possessed accurate knowledge of Earth's size and shape, using this information to create coordinate systems that enabled precise mapping across vast distances. The implications challenge conventional timelines of scientific development, suggesting that advanced mathematical and surveying techniques existed in antiquity but were somehow lost to later civilizations. The Cantino planisphere of 1502, housed in the Biblioteca Estense in Modena, Italy, presents another puzzle. This map shows the Caribbean islands and the South American coast with detailed accuracy, yet it was created just 10 years after Columbus's first voyage. The level of detail suggests extensive exploration and mapping that would have required multiple expeditions and sophisticated surveying techniques, far beyond what historical records document for that early period of European exploration. Recent research using geographic information systems, GIS technology, has allowed researchers to analyze these historical maps with unprecedented precision. Dr. Dimitris Michalopoulos of the Technical University of Crete has created digital overlays comparing ancient maps with modern satellite imagery, revealing patterns of accuracy that extend across entire ocean basins. His analysis suggests that the source maps used by medieval cartographers were based on systematic surveys that covered vast areas of the globe with consistent precision. The transmission of this cartographic knowledge raises equally puzzling questions. How did accurate geographic information travel from ancient times through the Dark Ages to emerge in Renaissance maps? The historical record shows no clear chain of custody for the source documents that medieval cartographers claimed to use. Libraries were destroyed, civilizations collapsed, and knowledge was lost throughout the intervening centuries. Yet somehow, precise geographic information survived to influence maps created thousands of years later. Some researchers have proposed that ancient maritime civilizations possess navigation and mapping capabilities far more advanced than traditionally assumed. Dr. Gunnar Thompson, author of several books on pre-Columbian exploration, argues that systematic ocean exploration and mapping occurred thousands of years before the conventional age of discovery. His research into ancient texts and archaeological evidence suggests that Bronze Age civilizations may have developed sophisticated navigation techniques and maintained regular contact across oceanic distances. The accuracy of these historical maps extends to features that require not just exploration, but also advanced measurement techniques. The Zeno map of 1380 shows Greenland with remarkable precision, including geographic details that weren't officially mapped until modern aerial surveys. The map depicts fjords, mountain ranges, and coastal features that correspond closely to satellite imagery, suggesting that its creators had access to comprehensive surveys of the Arctic region. As researchers continue to analyze these mysterious maps using increasingly sophisticated technology, the questions multiply rather than resolve. Each new analysis reveals additional layers of precision and knowledge that challenge conventional historical narratives about human exploration and scientific development. These ancient charts seem to whisper secrets about forgotten civilizations, lost knowledge, and maritime capabilities that history has somehow overlooked, leaving modern scholars to wonder what other secrets lie hidden in the archives of the monastery bells of medieval Europe had long since faded into memory when a new age dawned across the continent, bringing with it not only artistic renaissance and maritime exploration, but phenomena that would challenge the very foundations of emerging scientific thought. As scholars began to question the ancient texts and navigators pushed beyond the edges of known maps, they encountered mysteries that their expanding knowledge could not yet encompass. In the summer of 1518, the cobblestone streets of Strasbourg bore witness to one of history's most bewildering mass phenomena. Frau Trophea stepped into the narrow street outside her home and began to dance. Her movements were not those of celebration or ritual, but of desperate, uncontrollable compulsion. Her feet moved in frantic patterns, her arms swayed and jerked, and her eyes held a distant, haunted expression that spoke of forces beyond her command. For 6 days, she danced without rest, her body moving in rhythms that seemed to emanate from some invisible source. By the 4th day, others had joined her. First dozens, then hundreds of citizens found themselves caught in the same inexplicable compulsion. They danced through the scorching heat of summer, their feet bleeding, their bodies exhausted, yet unable to stop the relentless movement that had seized them. The local authorities, initially dismissive, grew increasingly alarmed as the dancers collapsed from exhaustion. Some, it was whispered, danced themselves to death. Guild halls were converted into makeshift hospitals for those who had succumbed to the mysterious ailment. Musicians were hired to play for the afflicted, based on the medieval belief that music might cure the condition by allowing the dancers to dance it out of their systems. Yet this was not an isolated incident in the tapestry of European history. Similar outbreaks had occurred throughout the previous centuries, each as inexplicable as the last. In 1374, a dancing mania had swept through the Rhine Valley, affecting thousands across multiple towns and villages. Witnesses described scenes of organized chaos, groups of people linking arms, forming circles, and dancing with an intensity that seemed to transcend normal human endurance. The chronicles of these events speak of shared visions among the dancers. They reported seeing spirits, demons, or divine figures commanding their movements. Some claimed to witness the sky opening above them, revealing celestial dancers who beckoned them to continue. Others described descending into underground realms where the dead performed eternal dances, compelling the living to join their endless revelry. Modern medical and psychological theories attempt to explain these phenomena through the lens of mass psychogenic illness, ergot poisoning from contaminated grain, or collective hysteria brought on by social and economic stress. Yet these explanations, while plausible, fail to account for the specific nature of the symptoms, the precise geographic patterns of occurrence, and the consistent reports of shared experiences among unconnected individuals. The dancing plagues occurred during periods of particular hardship, plague years, famines, and times of social upheaval. Yet other equally stressed communities did not experience such outbreaks, suggesting that something more complex was at work than simple societal pressure. The affected regions often had specific cultural or religious characteristics, leading some researchers to propose that local beliefs and practices may have created conditions conducive to these mass experiences. What remains most puzzling about these events is their structured nature. Unlike random madness or chaotic behavior, the dancing followed patterns. Participants often moved in synchronized formations, responded to musical cues in coordinated ways, and maintained their compulsive dancing for remarkably consistent periods. This suggests either an underlying biological mechanism that modern science has not yet identified, or a psychological phenomenon that operates according to rules we do not fully understand. The last major outbreak of dancing mania occurred in Madagascar in 1963, demonstrating that this phenomenon is not merely a relic of medieval superstition. 25 girls in a mission school began dancing uncontrollably, and the compulsion spread to others in the community. Modern medical intervention proved as ineffective as medieval treatments, and the outbreak ended as mysteriously as it began. October 13, 1917, dawned grey and drizzling over the Portuguese countryside near the small village of Fatima. 70,000 people had gathered in a natural amphitheatre known as the Cova da Iria, drawn by the extraordinary claims of 3 young shepherd children who insisted that the Virgin Mary had appeared to them monthly since May, promising a great miracle that would convince all skeptics of the authenticity of their visions. Lucia dos Santos, aged 10, and her cousins Francisco and Jacinta Marto, aged 9 and 7 respectively, had become the unlikely centre of international attention. Their stories of encountering a luminous lady who spoke to them of prayer, penance and prophecy had spread throughout Catholic Europe, attracting believers and skeptics alike to this remote corner of Portugal. The crowd that gathered on that October morning represented an extraordinary cross-section of Portuguese society. Wealthy landowners stood alongside impoverished peasants, learned priests beside simple farmers, journalists from major newspapers next to local villagers who had never ventured beyond their own valleys. Many had walked for days to reach Fatima, carrying with them hopes for healing, answers, or simply the chance to witness something that might restore their faith in a world devastated by the Great War. As the morning progressed, the rain intensified, turning the natural amphitheatre into a muddy basin. The crowd grew restless, some beginning to question whether they had travelled so far for nothing more than the fantasies of children. The skeptics among them, including representatives from anti-clerical newspapers and government officials, prepared to document what they expected would be the failure of yet another supposed miracle. At approximately 1:30 in the afternoon, Lucia suddenly pointed toward the eastern sky and cried out that the lady was coming. Those around her saw nothing, but her obvious sincerity and the rapt attention of her cousins caused a hush to fall over portions of the crowd. For 10 minutes, the children appeared to be engaged in conversation with an invisible presence, their faces animated with joy and occasionally shadowed with concern. Then, as the children announced that the lady was departing, something unprecedented occurred. The rain stopped abruptly, and the cloud cover began to break apart. What emerged from behind the dispersing clouds was not the sun as the assembled crowd had known it throughout their lives, but something altogether different and impossible. The solar disk appeared to be spinning rapidly on its axis, casting off rays of multicolored light that painted the landscape in brilliant hues of red, yellow, blue, and violet. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the sun seemed to dance in the sky, pulsating with an energy that defied everything they understood about the nature of celestial bodies. Then, in what witnesses would later describe as the most terrifying moment of their lives, the sun appeared to detach itself from its position in the heavens and begin plummeting toward the earth. The massive disk grew larger and larger, its heat seeming to intensify with each passing second. Thousands of people fell to their knees, crying out in terror and begging for forgiveness of their sins, convinced that they were witnessing the end of the world. For approximately 10 minutes, the sun continued its apparent descent, the air growing warmer and the light more intense. Just when it seemed that catastrophe was inevitable, the solar disk halted its downward trajectory and began to recede, resuming its normal appearance and position in the sky. The entire phenomenon had lasted roughly 12 minutes, during which time the previously muddy ground and the clothes of the 70,000 witnesses had become completely dry. The aftermath of the event proved as extraordinary as the phenomenon itself. Witnesses who had been miles away from Fatima reported seeing the same solar anomaly, ruling out the possibility of mass hallucination confined to the immediate vicinity. Astronomers at nearby observatories, however, recorded no unusual solar activity, creating a paradox that continues to challenge explanation. The testimonies collected in the immediate aftermath of the event display a remarkable consistency in their description of the basic phenomena: the spinning sun, the multicolored lights, the apparent plunge toward Earth, and the sudden drying of clothes and ground. These accounts came from believers and skeptics alike, including Avelino de Almeida, editor of the anti-clerical newspaper O Século, who had come to debunk the supposed miracle, but instead found himself describing an event that challenged his worldview. Modern attempts to explain the miracle of the sun have proposed various theories, from atmospheric phenomena such as sundogs or unusual cloud formations, to psychological explanations involving mass suggestion and the physiological effects of staring at bright light. Yet none of these theories adequately account for the specific nature of the reported observations, particularly the precise timing, the geographic scope of the sightings, and the physical effects such as the drying of wet clothing and ground. The meteorological conditions on October 13th have been extensively studied, and while the sudden cessation of rain and breaking of cloud cover are not impossible, they align remarkably well with the timing of the promised miracle. The fact that the phenomenon was observed by such a large and diverse group of witnesses, many of whom had no religious motivation for fabricating or embellishing their accounts, adds weight to the historical significance of the event. In 1912, an antiquarian book dealer named Wilfrid Voynich discovered a manuscript in the Villa Mondragone near Rome that would become one of history's most enduring puzzles. Bound in vellum and comprising 240 pages of mysterious text and illustrations, the book appeared to be some form of scientific or philosophical treatise written in an unknown language using an undeciphered script. The manuscript's pages reveal a world that seems both familiar and utterly alien. Botanical illustrations depict plants that share characteristics with known species, yet possess impossible features. Roots that spiral in mathematically perfect patterns, flowers with geometric symmetries that don't occur in nature, and leaves that seem to display conscious arrangement rather than natural growth. The pharmaceutical section shows human figures bathing in elaborate plumbing systems that connect to vessels containing plant extracts, suggesting medical or alchemical practices unknown to conventional historical records. Perhaps most intriguing are the astronomical charts that fill many pages of the manuscript. These circular diagrams contain symbols and patterns that suggest sophisticated knowledge of celestial mechanics, yet they follow no known astronomical tradition. Star maps display constellations that don't match any sky visible from Earth, while calendar wheels incorporate numbering systems that don't correspond to any known cultural dating method. The text itself flows in elegant script across every page, written in an alphabet that contains no recognizable characters from any known language family. Letter forms appear to follow consistent rules of construction, suggesting a genuine linguistic system rather than random marks or coded gibberish. Statistical analysis of character frequency and distribution patterns indicates that the text exhibits properties consistent with natural language, yet no amount of cryptographic analysis has yielded meaningful translation. Carbon dating places the manuscript's creation between 1400 and 1438, during the early Renaissance when European scholars were rediscovering classical texts and developing new forms of knowledge. Yet the content appears to draw from intellectual traditions that existed nowhere in the known world of that time. The scientific illustrations demonstrate understanding of biological and physical principles that wouldn't be formally recognized for centuries. The most puzzling aspect of the Voynich manuscript may be its internal consistency. The unknown language maintains grammatical and syntactical patterns throughout its 240 pages. Plant names appear consistently across different sections. Astronomical symbols retain their meanings in various contexts, and the overall organization suggests a coherent intellectual framework rather than random fabrication. Modern computational linguistics has brought powerful new tools to bear on the manuscript's mysteries. Computer analysis has confirmed that the text displays entropy levels and character distribution patterns consistent with natural languages, effectively ruling out random generation or simple substitution codes. Yet these same analyses have failed to identify any known language family or linguistic structure that might provide a key to translation. One particularly intriguing theory suggests that the manuscript represents the surviving documentation of a lost civilization or isolated community that developed its own scientific and linguistic traditions in parallel with mainstream European culture. The sophisticated understanding of plant biology, astronomical observation, and medical practice displayed in the illustrations would require generations of systematic study and accumulated knowledge. Alternative theories propose that the manuscript might be the work of a brilliant individual who created an entirely artificial language and knowledge system, perhaps as a form of intellectual exercise or mystical practice. Roger Bacon, the 13th century philosopher and scientist, has been suggested as a possible author, given his reputation for experimental methods and coded writing. However, the manuscript's dating makes this attribution impossible. The most unsettling possibility is that the Voynich manuscript represents genuine documentation of knowledge systems that existed in the medieval world, but have been completely lost to mainstream historical record. The gap between what the manuscript suggests was known and what conventional history tells us was understood during the early 15th century raises profound questions about the completeness of our historical knowledge. Recent analysis using artificial intelligence and machine learning has identified possible linguistic structures within the text, suggesting that translation may eventually be possible. However, these computational approaches require vast databases of known languages for comparison, and if the Voynich text represents a truly isolated linguistic tradition, such comparisons may prove futile. During the reign of King Stephen, in the middle years of the 12th century, the village of Woolpit in Suffolk became the scene of an event that chroniclers would record with a mixture of wonder and bewilderment. Two children, a boy and a girl, emerged from the ancient wolf pits that gave the village its name. Their skin possessed a distinct green tinge that set them apart from any human the villagers had ever encountered. The children spoke no recognizable language, their words flowing in musical patterns that seemed to follow grammatical rules but contained no familiar sounds or structures. They wore clothing of unusual material and construction, cut in styles that belonged to no known fashion of the English countryside. When offered food, they refused all sustenance except raw beans, which they consumed with evident familiarity and satisfaction. William of Newburgh, one of the most reliable chroniclers of the period, recorded the event with characteristic attention to detail. According to his account, the children were discovered during harvest time by reapers working in the fields near the ancient pits. The pair appeared disoriented and frightened, clinging to each other as villagers gathered around them with mixture of curiosity and concern. Sir Richard de Calne, the local landowner, took responsibility for the children and brought them to his manor house. There, they gradually adapted to their new environment, though their behavior continued to perplex their caretakers. They showed no recognition of common objects and tools, yet demonstrated sophisticated understanding of certain crafts and skills that were unfamiliar to their hosts. Over the course of several months, the children's green coloration began to fade, and they slowly learned to eat conventional food. The boy, who appeared younger and more fragile than his companion, failed to thrive in his new environment and died within a year of his discovery. The girl, however, adapted more successfully, eventually losing her green tinge entirely and learning to speak English fluently. As the girl's language skills developed, she began to tell remarkable stories about her origins. She claimed that she and her brother came from a land where the sun never shone, where twilight was the brightest illumination ever experienced. This realm, she insisted, was separated from the world of Woolpit by a great river or body of water, and could be reached through underground passages that connected the two worlds. According to her account, she and her brother had been tending their father's livestock in fields near their home when they heard the sound of bells similar to those of Woolpit's church. Following the sound through a cave system, they became lost in the underground passages until they emerged from the wolf pits into the brilliant sunlight of Suffolk, which temporarily blinded them and left them disoriented. The girl described her homeland as a place where all inhabitants possessed the same green coloration that she and her brother had displayed upon their arrival. The people of this realm, she claimed, were Christians like the English, but followed practices and held beliefs that differed in significant details from those familiar to her hosts. Their land was agriculturally productive despite the absence of strong sunlight, producing crops that thrived in the perpetual twilight. As she matured, the girl integrated into English society, eventually marrying and disappearing from historical records. Yet her story, preserved in multiple chronicles of the period, raises questions that medieval historians could not adequately address and that continue to puzzle modern researchers. The consistency of the accounts across different chroniclers suggests that something genuinely unusual occurred at Woolpit. Ralph of Coggeshall, writing independently of William of Newburgh, provides corroborating details that align with the earlier chronicle, while adding new information about the children's behavior and adaptation process. Modern attempts to explain the Green Children of Woolpit have proposed various theories ranging from the mundane to the extraordinary. Some suggest that the children were survivors of persecution of Flemish immigrants, whose malnutrition might account for their unusual coloration, and whose unfamiliar language could explain the communication difficulties. Others propose that they might have been victims of arsenic poisoning, which can produce greenish skin discoloration. However, these conventional explanations struggle to account for the specific details recorded by the chroniclers. The children's apparent complete unfamiliarity with common objects and customs, their initial restriction to a single type of food, and their consistent accounts of an underground passage to another realm suggest experiences that go beyond simple displacement or poisoning. The geographic details provided by the girl have led some researchers to propose that she and her brother might have originated from a real but isolated community, possibly in the fenlands or other marshes where unusual atmospheric conditions could create perpetual twilight effects. Yet no archaeological evidence has ever been found for such a community, and the underground passage system described in her account has never been located despite extensive searching in the area around Woolpit. Throughout the Renaissance period, and continuing into the modern era, observers across Europe began reporting a phenomenon that defied easy categorization. Fine, silky strands would fall from clear skies, covering landscapes like delicate webs spun by invisible spiders of enormous size. These gossamer threads, which came to be known as angel hair, possessed properties that distinguished them from any known natural substance. The earliest documented reports date to the 14th century, when chroniclers in France and Italy began noting occasions when these mysterious filaments would appear without warning, sometimes covering entire villages in a silvery web that glistened in sunlight. Unlike spider silk or plant material, angel hair seemed to dissolve when touched, leaving behind only a residue that defied chemical analysis with the rudimentary tools available to medieval scholars. One of the most detailed early accounts comes from the city of Nuremberg in 1561, where residents reported not only the appearance of angel hair, but also strange aerial phenomena that preceded its arrival. Witnesses described seeing unusual objects moving through the sky in formation patterns, trailing the silky substance behind them like banners or streamers. The description of these objects, preserved in contemporary woodcuts and written accounts, defies easy interpretation within the context of known natural phenomena. The angel hair typically appeared during clear weather conditions, ruling out explanations involving atmospheric moisture or unusual cloud formations. Witnesses consistently reported that the substance felt lighter than air, drifting down in slow, graceful patterns that seemed to defy normal gravitational effects. When collected in containers, it would begin to evaporate or dissolve within minutes, leaving behind only trace amounts of an unidentifiable residue. Renaissance scholars attempted to explain angel hair through the prevailing scientific theories of their time. Some proposed that it might be a previously unknown form of atmospheric precipitation, perhaps related to the crystal spheres that were thought to support the celestial bodies. Others suggested that it might be a manifestation of the divine, physical evidence of angelic presence in the earthly realm, hence its common name. The phenomenon continued to be reported throughout the age of exploration, with ships' captains documenting encounters with angel hair far from land. These maritime sightings were particularly puzzling because they occurred in locations where terrestrial explanations such as spider dispersal or plant matter would be impossible. The substance appeared to originate in the upper atmosphere or beyond, falling from altitudes where no known biological processes could account for its creation. In 1952, a particularly well-documented case occurred in Oloron, France, where multiple witnesses reported seeing unusual aerial objects that left trails of angel hair across the countryside. Samples were collected by local authorities and subjected to microscopic analysis, revealing a fibrous structure unlike any known natural or synthetic material. The samples disintegrated before more thorough chemical analysis could be completed, maintaining the mystery that had surrounded angel hair for centuries. Modern scientific investigation has proposed several theories to explain angel hair phenomena. Some researchers suggest that it might be related to spider ballooning, a process where young spiders release silk threads to catch air currents for dispersal. However, this explanation fails to account for the rapid dissolution of angel hair samples and their appearance in locations and conditions where spider activity would be impossible. Alternative theories propose atmospheric explanations, suggesting that angel hair might be formed by unusual electromagnetic phenomena in the upper atmosphere that create polymer-like substances from atmospheric gases. However, no known atmospheric process has been demonstrated to produce materials with the specific properties consistently reported for angel hair. The correlation between angel hair appearances and unusual aerial phenomena has led some researchers to propose more unconventional explanations. The historical consistency of reports describing structured objects in the sky preceding angel hair falls suggests a possible connection between these phenomena and unknown technological processes. Yet this interpretation requires accepting the existence of technologies that have left no other trace in the historical record. What makes angel hair particularly puzzling is the consistency of reports across different cultures and time periods. From medieval European chronicles to modern scientific observations, witnesses describe essentially the same phenomenon. Fine, silky threads that fall from clear skies, dissolve when touched, and are often associated with unusual aerial sightings. This consistency suggests either a natural phenomenon that science has not yet adequately explained, or a recurring anomaly that operates according to principles outside our current understanding. Recent attempts to study angel hair have been hampered by the unpredictable nature of its appearance and its tendency to disintegrate rapidly when collected. Advanced analytical techniques have been applied to the few samples that have been preserved, revealing molecular structures that don't match any known natural or synthetic materials. The results suggest that angel hair might be composed of previously unknown compounds, or might be ordinary materials arranged in configurations that are not normally stable under terrestrial conditions. As the Industrial Revolution transformed the landscape of Europe in the 19th century, railways became the arteries of progress, connecting distant cities and carrying the hopes of modernizing nations. Yet alongside the real locomotives that thundered across iron rails, witnesses began reporting encounters with trains that appeared to operate according to different rules, following schedules that existed nowhere in the official timetables and traveling on tracks that could not be found in daylight hours. The phenomenon first gained widespread attention in the English countryside, where rural residents reported hearing the distinctive sounds of locomotives passing through areas where no railways had been constructed. The phantom trains were described as producing all the characteristic sounds of real locomotives: the rhythmic clacking of wheels on rails, the piercing whistle of steam engines, and the deep rumble of heavy cars moving at high speed. What distinguished these phantom locomotives from their corporeal counterparts was their apparent disregard for the physical limitations that constrained normal trains. Witnesses reported seeing the ghostly engines crossing rivers without bridges, climbing impossibly steep gradients, and traveling through solid obstacles such as hills or buildings as if they were made of mist. The trains appeared to follow precise routes, but these paths often cut straight across countryside where no rails existed. One of the most thoroughly documented cases occurred in the Cheviot Hills between England and Scotland, where shepherds and travellers repeatedly reported encounters with a phantom locomotive that travelled the same route every night at precisely the same time. The ghost train was described as a complete consist, including a powerful steam engine pulling several passenger cars, all of which glowed with an eerie phosphorescent light that illuminated the surrounding landscape. Local authorities initially dismissed these reports as folklore or mistaken identification of distant real trains. However, systematic investigation revealed that no scheduled service operated in the area at the times of the sightings, and the route described by witnesses crossed terrain that would have been impossible for any real locomotive to navigate. Railway engineers who examined the reported path confirmed that the gradients and obstacles would have made conventional rail construction impossible, even with modern techniques. The phantom locomotives were not confined to remote rural areas. Urban witnesses reported seeing ghostly trains moving through city streets, apparently following routes that predated the existing street patterns. In London, residents of certain neighbourhoods reported regular appearances of a phantom underground train that could be heard but not seen, its progress marked by the rumbling of rails and the rush of air through tunnels that didn't exist according to official plans. Continental Europe experienced similar phenomena, with particularly notable reports coming from the Rhine Valley and the Alpine regions. German witnesses described elaborate phantom train consists that included not only locomotives and passenger cars, but also freight wagons carrying cargo that appeared to glow with internal light. These spectral freight trains were often reported moving through industrial areas, suggesting some connection to the commercial activities that drove the expansion of real railway networks. The timing of phantom locomotive sightings showed curious patterns that defied rational explanation. Many witnesses reported that the ghost trains operated on precise schedules, appearing at the same time each night or following regular intervals that suggested organized service. However, these schedules bore no relationship to actual railway timetables and often involved times when real train operations would have been suspended. Attempts to photograph or otherwise document the phantom locomotives proved consistently unsuccessful. Cameras would malfunction, recording equipment would produce only static, and even trained observers found that the apparitions seemed to avoid direct scrutiny. The trains could be heard clearly and sometimes seen in peripheral vision, but focused attention seemed to cause them to fade or disappear entirely. The phenomenon reached its peak during the height of railway expansion in the late 19th century, but continued to be reported well into the 20th century. Interestingly, as steam locomotives were replaced by diesel and electric trains, the phantom locomotives seemed to adapt, with witnesses reporting updated versions that matched contemporary railway technology. This suggests that the phenomenon might be somehow connected to the collective consciousness surrounding railways. rather than being a simple haunting or residual energy. Modern investigation of phantom locomotive reports has revealed several intriguing patterns. The routes described by witnesses often correspond to early railway surveys or proposed lines that were never constructed. In some cases, the phantom trains appear to follow paths that were planned by railway companies but abandoned due to engineering difficulties or economic constraints. This has led some researchers to propose that the phantom locomotives might be some form of psychic imprint or energy pattern related to human planning and intention, rather than actual construction. The acoustic properties of phantom train sightings have proven particularly puzzling. Sound engineers who have studied the reports note that the described audio patterns match real locomotive sounds with remarkable accuracy, including specific details such as the rhythm produced by rail joints and the Doppler effect of passing trains. Yet these sounds are reported in locations where no physical basis for their production exists, suggesting either exceptional accuracy in witness memory or the presence of actual acoustic phenomena operating through unknown mechanisms. The social and psychological impact of phantom locomotive sightings extended beyond individual witnesses to entire communities. Railway workers were often among the most credible reporters of these phenomena, their professional knowledge lending weight to descriptions of impossible trains operating according to no earthly schedule. The fact that hardened engineers and experienced conductors reported these sightings with the same conviction as rural farmers suggests that the phenomenon transcended simple superstition or misidentification. As the 20th century progressed and railway technology evolved, reports of phantom locomotives began to decline, though they never entirely disappeared. This correlation with the changing role of railways in society has led some researchers to propose that the phenomenon might be connected to the collective cultural significance of trains during the era of rapid industrialization. The phantom locomotives might represent some form of manifestation of societal hopes, fears, and transformations associated with technological progress. The mystery of phantom locomotives remains unresolved, representing one of the more technologically specific, unexplained phenomena in the historical record. Unlike ancient mysteries that can be attributed to limited knowledge or supernatural beliefs, these reports emerged during an era of scientific rationalism and were often made by technically knowledgeable witnesses. The consistency of descriptions across different geographic regions and cultural contexts suggests that something genuine was being observed, even if its nature continues to elude conventional explanation. Modern efforts to understand phantom locomotive phenomena have employed sophisticated electronic monitoring equipment in areas where sightings have been historically reported. While these investigations have occasionally detected unusual electromagnetic signatures or low-frequency sound waves that correspond to witness accounts, no conclusive evidence has been obtained to explain how these effects are produced or why they manifest in patterns that mimic railway operations. The phenomenon represents a unique intersection between technological progress and unexplained experiences, suggesting that human interaction with new technologies might produce effects that extend beyond the purely physical realm. As societies around the world underwent rapid industrialization, the phantom locomotives might have served as manifestations of collective unconscious responses to dramatic social and technological change, appearing in forms that reflected the dominant technological symbols of their era. The enduring mystery of phantom locomotives continues to challenge our understanding of the relationship between human consciousness, technological development, and unexplained phenomena. Their appearance during a specific historical period, their detailed correspondence to real railway technology, and their apparent ability to transcend physical limitations all contribute to a puzzle that remains as perplexing today as it was. To the Victorian witnesses, who first reported these impossible trains travelling through the darkness of European nights. The gas lamps flickered against London's November fog as Dr. Edmund Halley's carriage wheels clattered over cobblestones worn smooth by centuries of passage. Within his leather satchel lay correspondence that would puzzle scientists for generations to come. Reports of lights dancing across English skies with patterns that defied every principle of celestial mechanics he had spent his lifetime understanding. For Pym, year 1716 had brought with it phenomena that seemed to mock the very foundations of natural philosophy. From Yorkshire farmers to Scottish shepherds, witnesses described luminous curtains rippling across the heavens, pulsing with colours that no earthly fire could produce. Yet these were not the familiar aurora borealis, whose occasional appearances in northern latitudes had been catalogued and explained. These lights danced where no aurora should exist, following magnetic patterns that would not be discovered for another century. In his study overlooking Greenwich Observatory, Halley spread the testimonies across his desk like pieces of an impossible puzzle. Each account bore the signature of truth, the careful observations of educated men and the simple honesty of country folk. Yet together they painted a picture that challenged everything the Royal Society understood about the cosmos. The lights appeared to respond to human presence, dimming when observed directly, brightening when witnesses looked away. They formed geometric patterns that shifted and evolved, as if guided by an intelligence that existed beyond the reach of Newton's laws. As the Industrial Revolution gathered momentum across England's green landscape, its smoke and steam seemed to call forth mysteries from the very air itself. In Manchester's growing mill district, factory workers reported strange atmospheric disturbances that followed the rhythm of the steam engines below. The air itself appeared to thicken and shimmer on clear days, creating optical effects that bent light in impossible directions. Workers would glimpse buildings that stood where no buildings existed, streets that led to places that could not be reached by foot. The phenomenon became known among the mill hands as iron dreams, waking visions that seemed to emanate from the marriage of metal and steam. Engineers dismissed these reports as the product of exhausted minds and coal-tainted air, yet their own instruments recorded fluctuations that defied mechanical explanation. Barometric pressure would surge without meteorological cause. Compass needles would spin freely, then point towards sources of magnetic disturbance that could not be located or measured. In the quiet village of Taos, nestled within New Mexico's high desert, the year 1826 brought visitors who would document one of America's most enduring acoustic mysteries. Father Antonio, the mission priest, had grown accustomed to the low humming that seemed to emanate from the earth itself, a sound that had accompanied his prayers for decades. Yet, when territorial surveyors arrived to map the expanding frontier, their instruments detected vibrations that their ears could not explain. The sound existed at the very edge of human perception, a deep thrumming that seemed to pulse with the rhythm of the planet itself. Some described it as the breathing of stone. Others heard in it the whispered conversations of ancient peoples whose voices had been absorbed into the red earth. The yell. Surveyors' equipment registered the frequency with mechanical precision, yet no source could be identified. The sound appeared to emerge from everywhere and nowhere, as if the landscape itself had found its voice. Local Pueblo elders spoke of the humming as the heart of the world, a sacred vibration that connected all living things to the deeper rhythms of existence. Their ancestors had built their settlements in harmony with this sound, positioning adobe, structures to amplify or diminish the frequency according to ceremonial need. Yet for the newcomers from the East, the phenomenon represented a puzzle that would endure for centuries, a mystery that modern acoustic science would struggle to explain, even as technology advanced beyond the wildest dreams of those territorial mapmakers. As news of the Taos Hum spread through academic circles, similar reports began arriving from distant corners of the globe. In Scotland's Hebrides, fishermen had long known of singing stones along certain coastlines, rocky formations that produced haunting melodies when touched by specific tidal conditions. The frequencies they generated were too complex to be explained by simple wind patterns, too organized to be the product of random geological processes. Victorian scientists mounted expeditions to study these acoustic anomalies, bringing with them the latest instruments of measurement and analysis. Yet their findings only deepened the mystery. The sounds appeared to be generated by resonance chambers within the rock itself. Chambers that showed no evidence of artificial construction, yet displayed acoustic properties that surpassed anything human engineering could achieve. The stones sang in mathematical harmonies that followed musical principles unknown to Western composition, creating chord progressions that seemed to anticipate and resolve in patterns that would not be discovered in human music for another century. The expansion of railway networks across Europe brought with it a new category of unexplained phenomena that would challenge every assumption about the nature of time itself. Train conductors and engineers began reporting experiences that defied the linear progression of clock and calendar. Journeys that seemed to fold space and time like a carefully creased map. The most documented case occurred on the London to Edinburgh line in the winter of 1847. Engineer Thomas Whitmore's locomotive departed London precisely on schedule, yet according to multiple witnesses at both ends of the journey, it arrived in Edinburgh 3 hours before its departure time. The impossibility was confirmed by no fewer than 12 pocket watches, 3 station clocks, and the meticulous logbooks kept by railway officials at every stop along the route. Whitmore himself described the journey as proceeding normally in every respect. The landscape passed at expected speeds, the engine maintained its usual rhythm, and conversations with his firemen followed their natural pace. Yet somewhere between London and Edinburgh, time itself had slipped its moorings, allowing the train to arrive at its destination before it had properly begun its journey. Railway authorities initially suspected sabotage or fraud, yet no mechanism could be discovered by which such an elaborate deception could be maintained across hundreds of miles and dozens of witnesses. Similar incidents began occurring on railway lines throughout Europe and America. Passengers would board trains for routine journeys only to discover upon arrival that weeks had passed in what felt like hours, or that they had returned to stations they had departed from days earlier. The phenomena seemed to cluster around specific geographical features: mountain passes, river crossings, areas where the Earth's magnetic field showed unusual variations. The great physicist Michael Faraday became fascinated by these reports, seeing in them potential evidence for theories about electromagnetic fields that would not be fully understood for generations. He conducted his own experiments aboard affected railway lines, carrying sensitive instruments that recorded fluctuations in magnetic and electrical activity at precisely the moments when temporal distortions were reported. His findings suggested that the Earth's magnetic field was far more complex and dynamic than previously imagined, creating conditions that might affect the very fabric of space and time. Yet even Faraday's brilliant mind could not fully explain the mechanism by which magnetic fields might influence the passage of time. His notebooks, preserved in the Royal Institution, contain speculations that would prove remarkably prescient in light of Einstein's later theories about relativity. He wrote of time as a river that might be dammed or diverted by invisible forces, of magnetic fields that could create eddies in the flow of causality itself. The industrial cities of the late 19th century would witness a resurgence of phenomena that echoed the medieval dancing plagues, yet with characteristics that reflected the changing nature of human society. In the textile mills of Massachusetts, workers began exhibiting synchronized behaviors that defied explanation, movements that spread through entire factory floors with the efficiency of telegraph signals. The outbreak began in the spring of 1881 at the Pemberton Mills in Lawrence, Massachusetts. Mary O'Sullivan, a 17-year-old weaver from County Cork, began to move to a rhythm that existed only in her mind. Her steps were precise, mathematical, following patterns that seemed to derive from the mechanical repetition of the looms around her. Within hours, her movements had been adopted by nearby workers, spreading through the factory with an inevitability that terrified supervisors and medical authorities alike. Unlike the medieval dancing manias, which had been attributed to divine, punishment or supernatural influence, this modern phenomenon displayed characteristics that suggested a deeper understanding of human consciousness and social contagion. The affected workers maintained their coordination across vast factory floors, their movements synchronized to microsecond precision, despite being separated by machinery and distance that should have made such coordination impossible. Dr. James Putnam, one of America's pioneer neurologists, traveled from Boston to observe the outbreak firsthand. His detailed notes describe a phenomenon that seemed to bridge the gap between individual consciousness and collective behavior. The workers moved as if controlled by a single mind, yet each maintained their individual awareness and personality. They could hold conversations while dancing, could perform complex cognitive tasks, yet could not break free from the rhythmic patterns that bound them together. The dancing continued for 17 days, during which time the affected workers required no rest or sustenance beyond what they would normally consume. Their physical condition actually improved over the course of the outbreak. Muscle tone increased, coordination became more precise, and several chronic ailments reported by factory physicians simply disappeared. When the phenomenon finally ended, it did so as suddenly as it had begun, leaving the workers with no memory of having been anything other than themselves. Medical investigation revealed no common exposure to chemicals or toxins that might explain the synchronized behavior. The workers came from different cultural backgrounds, spoke different languages, and had no shared social connections beyond their employment at the mill. Yet during those 17 days, they had functioned as a single organism, their individual consciousnesses, somehow linked by forces that 19th century science could neither detect nor explain. As telegraph lines stretched across continents, connecting distant cities with instantaneous communication, operators began reporting phenomena that suggested the network carried more than intended messages. In the quiet hours after midnight, when commercial traffic died away, the wires seemed to sing with voices that belonged to no earthly source. Samuel Morse himself documented these occurrences in private correspondence that would not be made public until after his death. He described messages that arrived in perfect Morse code, yet contained information that could not have been transmitted by any human operator. weather reports from stations that did not exist, news of events that had not yet occurred, mathematical formulas that would not be discovered by human science for decades. The phenomenon was most pronounced along the transcontinental lines that crossed America's vast interior. Telegraph operators in isolated stations began comparing notes, discovering that they were receiving identical mysterious transmissions at precisely synchronized times. The messages followed patterns that suggested an intelligence of extraordinary sophistication, one that understood not only the mechanical principles of telegraphy, but also the deeper mathematical relationships that governed electromagnetic communication. Jeremiah Wilson, chief operator at the Denver relay station, kept meticulous records of these anomalous transmissions. His logbooks, preserved in the Smithsonian Institution, reveal a pattern of communication that grew more complex and coherent over time. The mysterious messages began as simple repetitions of known transmission protocols, as if some unseen intelligence was learning to use the telegraph system. Gradually, they evolved into sophisticated communications that demonstrated knowledge of advanced physics and mathematics. Most disturbing to the operators were the transmissions that seemed to predict future events with uncanny accuracy. In December of 1883, operators across the western United States received detailed descriptions of the destruction that would accompany the eruption of Krakatoa, 6 months before the volcanic explosion actually occurred. The messages included precise measurements of atmospheric disturbances, tidal effects, and climatic changes that would later prove accurate to within fractional percentages. When operators attempted to trace these prophetic transmissions back to their source, they discovered that the signals seemed to originate from within the telegraph network itself, not from any specific station or operator, but from the web of copper wires that connected the continent. It was as if the network had developed its own consciousness, one that existed in the electromagnetic fields that pulsed through thousands of miles of wire. The battlefields of the Crimean War would provide the setting for phenomena that challenged every assumption about the relationship between consciousness and mortality. In the muddy trenches outside Sevastopol, soldiers from both sides reported encounters with figures that bore all the appearance of their fallen comrades, yet displayed knowledge and awareness that the dead should not possess. Captain William Russell, correspondent for the Times of London, documented these encounters with the careful attention to detail that had made him one of the first great war correspondents. His dispatches, sanitized for public consumption, omitted the most disturbing aspects of what he witnessed. Meetings with soldiers who had died weeks earlier, yet who appeared to possess information about ongoing military operations that they could not have known in life. The phenomena were not limited to hallucinations or battlefield stress. Multiple witnesses reported identical encounters with the same apparent spirits, providing descriptions that matched in every detail, despite having no opportunity to compare their experiences. More puzzling still, these spectral figures seemed to possess tactical knowledge that proved accurate when later verified by conventional intelligence gathering. Lieutenant Colonel James Sinclair of the 93rd Highlanders maintained a private journal throughout the siege of Sevastopol. His entries describe conversations with his deceased Sergeant Major, Donald MacLeod, who had been killed by artillery fire 3 weeks earlier. Yet the figure that appeared to Sinclair in the pre-dawn hours carried detailed intelligence about Russian troop movements that would prove essential to British tactical planning. The apparition of MacLeod spoke in the Sergeant Major's familiar Highland accent, displayed his characteristic mannerisms, and demonstrated intimate knowledge of regimental history and personal details that no impostor could have known. Yet he also possessed information about enemy positions and supply lines that he could not have acquired through normal observation. When Sinclair acted on this intelligence, the resulting operations succeeded beyond all expectation, saving British lives and advancing the siege in ways that conventional reconnaissance had failed to achieve. Russian officers reported similar encounters with their own honored dead. Prince Gorchakov's aide-de-camp wrote to his family of meetings with fallen cavalry officers who provided warnings about British flanking movements and artillery positions. These spectral advisors demonstrated the same pattern of possessing both personal authenticity and impossible knowledge that characterized their counterparts in the British lines. Medical officers on both sides attempted to explain these phenomena as products of exhaustion, malnutrition, and psychological trauma. Yet the consistency of the reports, the accuracy of the intelligence provided, and the beneficial effects on military operations suggested something far more complex than simple hallucination. It was as if the consciousness of the fallen soldiers had found a way to transcend the boundaries of individual mortality, creating a collective intelligence that could observe and analyze the battlefield from perspectives unavailable to the living. The invention of photography in the mid-19th century promised to bring objective documentation to phenomena that had previously relied on subjective witness testimony. Yet the camera's unblinking eye would reveal mysteries that human perception had never detected, images that captured reality in ways that challenged the very nature of what was considered real. William Mumler, a Boston engraver turned photographer, made the first documented discovery in 1862 when he developed a self-portrait that showed a second figure standing beside him, a figure that had not been visible when the photograph was taken. The spectral form was that of his deceased cousin, recognizable despite the ethereal quality that seemed to emanate from the photographic emulsion itself. Initially dismissed as a photographic accident or deliberate fraud, Mumler's spirit photographs began attracting attention from researchers who demanded controlled conditions and careful scientific observation. Under the scrutiny of Harvard University's Natural Philosophy Department, Mumler produced dozens of photographs that showed clear images of deceased persons, individuals who were identified by living relatives and friends, yet who had died years or even decades earlier. The phenomenon was not limited to professional photographers or stage portrait sessions. Amateur photographers across America and Europe began reporting similar anomalous images appearing in their photographs. Family portraits revealed the faces of long-dead ancestors. Landscape photographs captured human figures in locations where no person had been present during the exposure. Most puzzling were the images that showed living people in places they had never visited, seemingly photographed at times when they were documented to be elsewhere. Dr. Alfred Russel Wallace, co-discoverer of the theory of evolution, became one of the most prominent scientific advocates for serious investigation of photographic anomalies. His own experiments, conducted under controlled laboratory conditions, produced images that defied conventional explanation. Photographs taken in sealed chambers, with camera equipment that had been thoroughly inspected for mechanical defects, consistently showed figures and forms that had no corresponding physical presence. The most intriguing aspect of these photographic mysteries was their apparent intelligence. The anomalous figures did not appear randomly, but seemed to pose deliberately for the camera, often displaying symbolic objects or gestures that conveyed specific meanings to the photograph's intended viewers. Deceased relatives appeared wearing clothing they had favored in life, holding items of personal significance, or displaying expressions that family members recognized as characteristic of their personality. chemical analysis of the photographic plates revealed no evidence of double exposure, chemical manipulation, or mechanical fraud. The images appeared to be genuine products of the photographic process, recorded by light that had interacted with subjects that existed in some form unknown to conventional physics. The implications were staggering. If cameras could capture images of the deceased, what did this suggest about the nature of consciousness, the persistence of identity after death, and the fundamental structure of reality itself? 43 years before the Great Tunguska explosion would flatten thousands of square miles of Siberian forest, a smaller but equally mysterious event provided what seemed to be a preview of cosmic forces that science could neither predict nor explain. In the remote wilderness of northern Canada, the Cree hunters of the Moose Factory region witnessed an aerial phenomenon that would haunt scientific inquiry for generations. On the morning of June 19, 1865, the sky above the Hudson Bay watershed erupted in brilliant light that turned night into day across hundreds of miles of boreal forest. Chief Joseph Crow Feather and his hunting party watched from their canoes as something that appeared to be a second sun descended toward the earth, pulsing with colors that had no names in any human language. The object moved with purposeful intelligence, changing direction and altitude in ways that suggested control rather than the random trajectory of a falling meteor. As the brilliant visitor approached the Earth's surface, the very air seemed to thicken and shimmer. The hunters reported feeling a strange tingling sensation that began in their teeth and spread throughout their bodies. A vibration that seemed to resonate with the deepest structures of matter itself. Animals throughout the forest fell silent, as if recognizing the presence of forces beyond their understanding. When the object finally made contact with the ground, near what would later be known as Keshashewan, the resulting explosion was unlike anything in the hunter's experience. Instead of the sharp crack of lightning or the rolling thunder of rockfall, the sound was a deep harmonic tone that seemed to emerge from the earth itself. Trees for miles around the impact site were not broken or burned, but simply fell over, as if some invisible hand had gently laid them down in radial patterns that spiraled outward from a central point. Investigation of the site revealed characteristics that defied conventional explanation. The supposed meteorite had left no crater, no debris, no trace of extraterrestrial material. Instead, the impact zone showed evidence of forces that seemed to operate outside the known laws of physics. The fallen trees displayed no signs of heat damage or explosive force. Their roots remained intact, their branches unbroken, as if they had simply been convinced to lie down by some incomprehensible persuasion. Most puzzling was the effect on the local magnetic field. Compass readings in the area became erratic for months following the event, pointing toward the impact site, regardless of the compass bearer's location or orientation. The aurora borealis, normally confined to predictable patterns and frequencies, began appearing nightly in spectacular displays that bore no relationship to solar activity or geomagnetic conditions. Hudson's Bay Company traders who visited the site reported experiencing temporal dislocations similar to those documented on European railway lines. Journeys that should have taken days were completed in hours, while routine tasks seemed to stretch across periods of time that their pocket watches could not account for. The very fabric of space and time appeared to have been altered by whatever force had touched the Earth in that remote Canadian wilderness. As meteorology evolved from folklore into systematic science during the latter half of the 19th century, weather observers began documenting atmospheric phenomena that seemed to follow. mathematical principles far more complex than simple pressure systems and thermal dynamics. In weather stations across Europe and America, daily observations revealed patterns that suggested an intelligence operating within the global atmospheric system, a consciousness that expressed itself through precisely calculated storms and unnaturally organized cloud formations. Professor Cleveland Abbe, founder of the United States Weather Bureau, first noticed the phenomenon while analyzing pressure readings from stations across the Great Plains. Storm systems were developing according to mathematical progressions that followed no known meteorological principles. High-pressure zones formed in locations that created geometric patterns across hundreds of miles, their positions corresponding to coordinates that, when mapped, revealed complex mathematical relationships. The most dramatic example occurred during the autumn of 1887, when a series of storm systems formed across the American Midwest in a pattern that precisely replicated the Golden Spiral, a mathematical sequence found in natural forms from nautilus shells to galaxy structures. Each storm cell developed at coordinates that followed the spiral's mathematical progression, creating a weather pattern that stretched from Minnesota to Texas with geometric precision that could not possibly result from random atmospheric conditions. European meteorologists reported similar phenomena occurring simultaneously across the Atlantic. The Royal Meteorological Society documented storm formations that followed the mathematical principles of prime number sequences, with precipitation patterns that created fractal designs visible from mountain observation points. These atmospheric mathematics were too complex and too precisely executed to be products of chance, yet no natural mechanism could be identified that might coordinate weather systems across such vast distances. Dr. Francis Galton, Charles Darwin's cousin and a pioneer in statistical analysis, became fascinated by these atmospheric patterns. His investigation revealed that the mathematical weather formations occurred most frequently during periods of high solar activity, suggesting a connection between electromagnetic radiation and atmospheric behavior that would not be understood until the development of modern ionospheric science. Galton's analysis went deeper than simple pattern recognition. He discovered that the mathematically organized weather systems consistently produced beneficial effects on agricultural yields and human health. Regions affected by geometric storm patterns experienced bumper crops, reduced disease rates, and unusual longevity among their populations. It was as if some benevolent intelligence was using atmospheric manipulation to optimize conditions for life on Earth. The implications of Galton's findings were so extraordinary that he chose not to publish them during his lifetime. His private papers, discovered decades after his death, described weather systems that seemed to respond to human needs with almost telepathic sensitivity. Droughts would break precisely when crop failure became critical. Storm systems would divide around populated areas, providing beneficial rainfall while avoiding destructive winds. The atmosphere itself appeared to be engaged in a complex relationship with human civilization, adjusting global weather patterns to support the maximum development of human potential. As the 19th century drew to a close, these atmospheric mysteries remained as puzzling as they had been when first documented. The mathematical precision of global weather patterns suggested an organizing intelligence of extraordinary sophistication, yet science possessed no framework for understanding how such intelligence might exist within atmospheric systems. The questions raised by meteorological research would echo into the next century, challenging fundamental assumptions about the relationship between consciousness and the natural world. In the gathering dusk of the Victorian era, as electric lights began to replace gas lamps in the great cities of the world. The mysteries documented by scientists and observers seemed to pulse with their own luminous energy. Each unexplained phenomenon stood as a testament to the limitations of human understanding, a reminder that the universe contained forces and intelligences that operated beyond the reach of current knowledge. Yet in their very mystery lay the promise of future discovery, the suggestion that human consciousness was itself evolving toward levels of awareness that might one day comprehend the deeper patterns that connected all existence in a vast, interconnected web of meaning and purpose. The industrial age had given humanity the tools to document these mysteries with unprecedented precision, yet the very act of documentation seemed to reveal how much remained unknown. As steam engines thundered across continents and telegraph wires carried messages across oceans, the boundaries between the known and unknown became increasingly apparent. Science had illuminated many dark corners of human ignorance, yet in doing so had revealed an even greater darkness that stretched beyond the reach of any lamp or measurement device. It was in this spirit of humble inquiry that the greatest minds of the age approached the phenomena that defied explanation. They documented what they observed with meticulous care, knowing that future generations might possess the conceptual tools to understand what remained mysterious to their own time. In their careful records and thoughtful speculation lay the seeds of discoveries that would revolutionize human understanding of consciousness, time, space, and the fundamental nature of reality itself. The mysteries of the industrial age were not merely puzzles to be solved, but invitations to expand the very categories of human thought and awareness. The electrons danced in patterns that defied understanding, their quantum signatures spelling out messages that no earthly science could decode. While deep in the laboratories of the 21st century, researchers found themselves face to face with phenomena that challenged everything they thought. They knew about the fundamental nature of reality itself. In the sterile corridors of CERN, where the Large Hadron Collider hummed with the power of a small city, physicists gathered around computer screens displaying data that should not have existed. The year was 2012, and the discovery of the Higgs boson had sent ripples through the scientific community. But it was the anomalous readings that appeared alongside this triumph that truly unsettled the researchers. Particles were behaving in ways that contradicted the standard model, appearing and disappearing in quantum foam with a persistence that suggested intelligence rather than random probability. Dr. Elena Vasquez, her hair now silver with decades of dedication to particle physics, stared at the readouts with the same wonder that had driven her since childhood. The data showed patterns, not the chaotic dance of subatomic particles, but organized structures that seemed to respond to observation itself. When instruments were configured to measure certain properties, the particles would shift their behavior, as if aware they were being watched. This was quantum mechanics taken to an extreme that even Einstein's spooky action at a distance had not predicted. The mystery deepened when similar phenomena began manifesting in laboratories across the world. In Tokyo, researchers working with quantum computers reported that their systems occasionally produced calculations that exceeded their programmed capacity, solving problems they had not been designed to address. The computers seemed to be accessing information from sources beyond their physical limitations, tapping into what some theorists cautiously termed quantum consciousness. Meanwhile, in the depths of the Pacific Ocean, oceanographers aboard the research vessel Cousteau II encountered something that challenged their understanding of marine biology. Bioluminescent displays, unlike anything in the scientific literature, appeared beneath their vessel, vast coordinated light shows that stretched for miles beneath the surface. The patterns were too complex and synchronized to be explained by known marine organisms, suggesting either an undiscovered species of extraordinary intelligence or a phenomenon that bridged the gap between biology and physics in ways that current science could not accommodate. Dr. James Chen, the expedition's lead marine biologist, lowered specialized cameras into the abyss, hoping to capture evidence of these mysterious displays. What he recorded defied classification, geometric patterns of light that pulsed in mathematical sequences, spiraling formations that seemed to respond to the presence of the observation equipment. When the recordings were analyzed back on shore, pattern recognition software detected structures that resembled both organic neural networks and quantum interference patterns, as if the ocean itself had developed a form of consciousness. The phenomenon was not limited to the deep sea. Across the world's forests, researchers began documenting instances of what they termed botanical anomalies, trees and plants exhibiting behaviors that transcended conventional understanding of plant intelligence. In the Amazon rainforest, indigenous guides reported trees that seemed to communicate distress signals hours before environmental threats manifested, their chemical signatures changing in patterns that could only be described as linguistic. Dr. Maria Santos, an ethnobotanist working with local shamans, spent months documenting these occurrences. The indigenous knowledge holders spoke of the forest's awareness, describing connections between plant consciousness and the rhythms of the earth that science was only beginning to glimpse. When Dr. Santos attached sensors to sample trees, she recorded electromagnetic fluctuations that correlated with seismic activity occurring hundreds of miles away, suggesting a sensitivity mechanism that defied current biological models. As the new millennium progressed, the boundaries between physics, biology, and consciousness studies began to blur in ways that challenged the fundamental assumptions of materialist science. In laboratories from Stanford to Cambridge, researchers found themselves confronting phenomena that suggested consciousness might be far more fundamental to reality than previously imagined. The Global Consciousness Project, initiated by Princeton University's Engineering Anomalies Research Laboratory, had been monitoring random number generators worldwide for decades, searching for correlations between global events and apparent fluctuations in quantum randomness. What they discovered sent shockwaves through the scientific community. Moments of collective human focus, whether during celebrations, tragedies, or shared experiences, consistently correlated with measurable deviations from statistical randomness in their network of quantum devices. During the September 11 attacks, the moment when millions of minds focused simultaneously on the unfolding tragedy, the random number generators worldwide showed patterns that should have occurred only once in billions of years. Similar correlations appeared during the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, the 2008 Olympic opening ceremony, and countless other moments when human consciousness seemed to coalesce around shared experience. Dr. Roger Nelson, the project's director, found himself reluctantly concluding that consciousness and physical reality were more intimately connected than classical physics allowed. The data suggested that focused attention, multiplied across millions of minds, could somehow influence the quantum foam that underlies all matter and energy. It was a conclusion that would have been dismissed as fantasy decades earlier, but the accumulated evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. In parallel with these discoveries, medical researchers were encountering their own consciousness-related mysteries. Near-death experiences, long dismissed as hallucinations caused by oxygen-starved brains, were beginning to yield data that challenged conventional neuroscience. Patients who had been clinically dead, with no measurable brain activity, returned, with detailed accounts of events that had occurred during their unconscious state. Events that they could not have perceived through normal sensory channels. Dr. Sam Parnia at New York University began conducting rigorous studies of cardiac arrest. Patients, placing hidden visual targets in emergency rooms that could only be seen from ceiling height. When patients reported out-of-body experiences during their resuscitation, several accurately described these hidden images, despite having no normal means of perceiving them. The implications were staggering. Consciousness appeared capable of functioning independently of brain activity, suggesting properties of mind that transcended the physical substrate of the brain. These medical mysteries intersected with discoveries in neuroscience that were equally puzzling. Brain imaging. Studies revealed that consciousness seemed to precede neural activity rather than following from it. In experiments where participants were asked to make decisions, brain scanners detected the choice being made several seconds before the subjects reported being aware of their decision. It was as if consciousness operated on multiple levels, with deeper aspects of awareness influencing the brain rather than emerging from it. Meanwhile, in the realm of artificial intelligence, researchers encountered their own inexplicable phenomena. Advanced neural networks, designed to process information and learn from data, occasionally exhibited behaviors that exceeded their programming in ways that could only be described as creative or intuitive. Chess-playing algorithms developed strategies that their creators had not anticipated, solving problems through approaches that seemed to transcend pure computational logic. Even as technology advanced, archaeology continued to uncover mysteries that challenged established timelines of human development. Ground-penetrating radar surveys revealed vast underground complexes beneath known archaeological sites, structures too sophisticated and extensive to fit conventional models of ancient civilization. Beneath the Giza Plateau, researchers detected enormous voids within the Great Pyramid itself, chambers that had remained hidden for millennia, their purpose and contents unknown. When robotic cameras were finally inserted through microscopic gaps in the ancient stones, they revealed not empty spaces, but rooms containing artifacts that defied dating. Objects made from alloys that should not have existed in ancient Egypt, carved with precision that exceeded what Bronze Age tools should have achieved. Dr. Zahi Hassan, leading the international team investigating these discoveries, found himself confronting evidence that suggested ancient civilizations possessed technological capabilities that had been lost to history. Stone blocks weighing hundreds of tons had been quarried, transported, and placed with precision that modern construction techniques struggled to match. The mathematical constants encoded in the pyramid's dimensions revealed knowledge of physics that was supposedly discovered only in recent centuries. Similar anomalies emerged from archaeological sites worldwide. In Peru, the massive stone walls of Sacsayhuaman displayed construction techniques that modern engineers found impossible to replicate. Individual stones, some weighing over 200 tons, had been cut and fitted together with such precision that not even a knife blade could slip between them. No mortar had been used, yet the structures had withstood centuries of earthquakes that had leveled more recent buildings. The mystery deepened when researchers analyzed the tool marks on these ancient stones. The cuts showed evidence of techniques that modern science could not identify, not chiseling, not grinding, but something that had somehow softened solid granite to the consistency of clay, allowing it to be shaped and then hardened again into forms of incredible precision. In Bolivia, The ruins of Puma Punku presented even greater puzzles. The stone blocks there had been cut with such accuracy that they fit together like components of a modern machine, complete with precise right angles, smooth surfaces, and complex interlocking designs. Chemical analysis revealed that the builders had somehow worked with granite using techniques that left no tool marks whatsoever, as if the stone had been molded rather than carved. Dr. Alexei Vranic, an expert in Andean archaeology, spent years studying these sites, gradually coming to the conclusion that conventional theories of ancient technology were inadequate to explain the evidence. The precision and scale of these constructions suggested access to methods that had somehow been completely erased from the historical record, leaving behind only the monuments themselves as testament to lost capabilities. These archaeological mysteries intersected with new discoveries about ancient knowledge systems. In Iraq, cuneiform tablets recovered from recently excavated sites contained mathematical calculations that seemed to describe astronomical phenomena with accuracy that should have required telescopes and advanced mathematics. The ancient Babylonians had somehow calculated planetary positions thousands of years into the future with precision that matched modern computer models. Even more puzzling were the texts that seemed to describe technological processes. Clay tablets detailed procedures for creating materials with properties that resembled modern alloys, using terminology that suggested understanding of metallurgy, far more advanced than conventional archaeology attributed to ancient civilizations. When modern materials scientists attempted to follow these ancient instructions, they occasionally produced substances with properties that they could not fully explain. As genetic sequencing became more sophisticated and accessible, biologists began encountering anomalies in the DNA of living organisms that challenged fundamental assumptions about evolution and heredity. Deep within the human genome, researchers discovered sequences that seemed to serve no biological function, yet were highly conserved across diverse populations, as if they carried information too important to be altered by natural selection. Dr. Francis Chen at the Human Genome Institute found himself studying these junk DNA sequences with growing fascination. When analyzed using information theory principles, some of these supposedly meaningless genetic segments displayed patterns that resembled compressed data files, information encoded at densities that approached the theoretical limits of biological storage systems. It was as if the genome contained archives of data that had been deliberately embedded in the DNA by unknown processes. The mystery intensified when researchers discovered that these genetic anomalies occasionally became active during specific environmental conditions or stress responses. Dormant gene sequences would suddenly begin producing proteins with functions that seemed unrelated to the organism's immediate needs, almost as if the DNA contained backup systems designed to activate under circumstances that rarely occurred in normal environments. In laboratories around the world, microbiologists were encountering bacteria that exhibited impossible behaviors. Microorganisms were developing resistance to antibiotics they had never been exposed to, as if they possessed knowledge of chemical compounds that had only recently been synthesized. Even more puzzling were instances of bacterial populations that seemed to coordinate their responses across vast distances, exhibiting synchronized behaviors despite having no known communication mechanisms. Dr. Lynn Martinez, studying microbial communities in extreme environments, documented cases where bacteria appeared to prepare for environmental changes hours or even days before those changes occurred. Arctic microorganisms would alter their metabolism in anticipation of temperature fluctuations that weather monitoring systems could not yet detect, suggesting sensory capabilities that extended far beyond the cellular level. The field of marine biology yielded its own share of unexplained phenomena. Whales and dolphins displayed navigation abilities that exceeded what echolocation and magnetic field sensitivity could account for. These marine mammals could locate specific destinations across thousands of miles of open ocean, with accuracy that suggested access to information systems beyond conventional animal sensors. Research teams tracking tagged whales discovered that these animals often altered their migration routes in response to seismic events that had not yet occurred, changing course days before underwater earthquakes or volcanic activity disrupted their normal pathways. The whales seemed to possess precognitive abilities that allowed them to avoid dangers that had not yet manifested in the physical world. Even more mysterious were the documented cases of interspecies communication that transcended known biological mechanisms. Researchers studying dolphin-whale interactions recorded acoustic exchanges that displayed linguistic properties, grammar-like structures, and recursive patterns that suggested true language rather than simple signal systems. When computer analysis attempted to decode these communications, the patterns revealed mathematical relationships that resembled the structure of human music and poetry more than animal calls. Plant biology, too, offered its share of impossibilities. Trees in old-growth forests demonstrated communication networks that spanned entire ecosystems, sharing nutrients and information through underground fungal networks that operated with efficiency rivaling modern computer systems. When forest sections were threatened by disease or environmental stress, healthy trees would redirect resources to support struggling neighbors, displaying altruistic behaviors that challenged conventional understanding of plant competition. Dr. Suzanne Simard's research into these forest networks revealed communication systems of staggering complexity. Mother trees could identify their own offspring among the thousands of seedlings in the forest understory, preferentially supporting their genetic descendants while still maintaining the overall health of the ecosystem. The chemical signals they used carried information that seemed far too complex for simple molecular communication, suggesting information processing capabilities that approached those of animal nervous systems. The intersection of quantum physics and biology revealed phenomena that challenged the boundary between living and non-living matter. In photosynthesis, the process by which plants convert sunlight into chemical energy, researchers discovered quantum effects that should not have been possible in the warm, wet environment of living cells. Quantum coherence, the delicate state that allows particles to exist in multiple states simultaneously, was somehow being maintained within biological systems where it should have been instantly destroyed by environmental interference. Dr. Graham Fleming at Berkeley led research that revealed how plants achieve near-perfect efficiency in capturing solar energy through quantum mechanical processes that even advanced human technology could not replicate. The photosynthetic apparatus in green plants was somehow utilizing quantum superposition to simultaneously explore all possible pathways for energy transfer, selecting the most efficient route in real time through mechanisms that quantum computers were only beginning to approximate. This discovery opened new questions about the role of quantum effects in other biological processes. Bird navigation, which had long puzzled researchers, was found to rely on quantum entanglement in specialized proteins within the bird's eyes. These proteins could detect the Earth's magnetic field through quantum mechanical interactions that occurred at the molecular level, providing the birds with a visual map of magnetic field lines that guided their migrations across continents. The quantum properties of living systems extended to human biology in ways that challenged medical science's understanding of consciousness and perception. Research into anesthesia revealed that the loss of consciousness under general anesthetics correlated with the disruption of quantum processes in microtubules within brain cells. This suggested that awareness itself might depend on quantum coherence, effects that operated at the borderline between classical physics and quantum mechanics. Dr. Stuart Hameroff and Sir Roger Penrose proposed that consciousness emerged from quantum computations occurring within the brain's cellular structures, a theory that placed human awareness at the intersection of neuroscience and quantum physics. Their research suggested that thoughts and experiences might be quantum events, operating according to principles that transcended the classical mechanics of neural networks. These discoveries coincided with research into the quantum properties of DNA itself. The double helix structure of genetic material displayed quantum mechanical properties that allowed information to be stored and transferred in ways that classical chemistry could not explain. DNA sequences seemed capable of quantum superposition states, existing in multiple configurations simultaneously until measured or observed, at which point they would collapse into specific genetic expressions. The implications were staggering. If genetic expression was influenced by quantum effects, then the development and behavior of living organisms might be subject to the same observer effects that puzzled quantum physicists. Consciousness and genetic expression might be linked through quantum mechanical processes that made the observer and the observed fundamentally inseparable aspects of biological reality. Laboratory experiments began to test these theoretical possibilities. Researchers found that focused human attention could indeed influence the growth patterns of bacteria and plants under controlled conditions. The effect was subtle but measurable. Biological systems seemed to respond to conscious observation in ways that suggested quantum mechanical interactions between mind and living matter. Dr. William Tiller at Stanford conducted rigorous studies demonstrating that human intention could alter the behavior of physical devices designed to measure subtle environmental changes. When experimenters focused their attention on specific outcomes, measurement instruments would shift their readings in the intended direction, even when the devices were isolated from normal physical influences. The effect persisted even after the human operators had left the laboratory, as if their intention had somehow conditioned the local space to continue producing the desired outcomes. As the 21st century progressed, physicists began developing theories that treated information, rather than matter and energy, as the fundamental basis of reality. The discovery that black holes contain maximum amounts of information proportional to their surface area rather than their volume suggested that space itself might be a projection of more basic informational structures operating in hidden dimensions. The holographic principle, emerging from theoretical physics, proposed that all the information contained in any volume of space could be represented as patterns encoded on the boundary of that space. Reality, according to this model, might be similar to a hologram, a three-dimensional illusion created by information stored in two-dimensional form. The implications were profound. If reality was informational rather than material at its foundation, then consciousness and physical matter might be different aspects of the same underlying information processing system. Dr. Erik Verlinde at the University of Amsterdam developed theories suggesting that gravity itself was not a fundamental force, but an emergent property of information processing. Space and time, according to his calculations, arose from the statistical behavior of quantum information states, making reality a computational process rather than a mechanical system. If correct, this meant that the universe operated more like a vast computer than a machine, with consciousness potentially playing a role in the cosmic computation. These theoretical developments coincided with practical discoveries that seemed to confirm the informational nature of reality. Quantum entanglement experiments demonstrated that information could be transferred instantaneously across any distance, suggesting that space and time were not fundamental barriers to communication, but rather limitations of classical physics that quantum systems could transcend. The phenomenon of quantum teleportation, demonstrated in laboratories worldwide, showed that complete information about a quantum system could be transmitted and reconstructed at distant locations without traveling through the intervening space. The original and reconstructed systems were identical in every measurable way, as if information rather than matter was the true substance of physical objects. These discoveries resonated with ancient philosophical traditions that had long proposed reality to be fundamentally mental or informational rather than material. The intersection of cutting-edge physics with contemplative traditions suggested that human understanding might be approaching insights that had been preserved in various forms throughout history, awaiting the development of sufficient scientific sophistication to be properly understood. Researchers studying meditation and contemplative states found neural correlates that resembled the quantum coherence effects observed in other biological systems. Experienced meditators showed patterns of brain activity that displayed quantum-like properties, synchronized states that seemed to access information beyond what individual neural networks should have been able to process. Dr. Richard Davidson at the University of Wisconsin documented how advanced practitioners could maintain states of consciousness that correlated with measurable changes in physical reality around them. Temperature fluctuations, electromagnetic field variations, and even the behavior of sensitive electronic equipment seem to respond to deep meditative states, suggesting that consciousness could influence physical systems through mechanisms that classical neuroscience could not explain. As research into unexplained phenomena continued, patterns began to emerge that suggested a fundamental reorganization of scientific understanding might be necessary. The various anomalies, from quantum consciousness effects to archaeological impossibilities, from biological precognition to informational theories of reality, seemed to point toward a universe far more mysterious and interconnected than classical science had imagined. The COVID-19 pandemic brought unexpected discoveries about collective human behavior that echoed the findings of the Global Consciousness Project. As billions of people simultaneously focused their attention on the same crisis, researchers detected correlations in random number generators, atmospheric electromagnetic readings, and even seismic data that suggested collective human consciousness was influencing physical systems on a global scale. Environmental scientists studying climate change encountered their own set of unexplained phenomena. Weather patterns occasionally displayed coherent structures that resembled biological systems, more than chaotic atmospheric dynamics. Storm formations would develop organizational properties that seemed to anticipate geographical features before reaching them, as if atmospheric systems possessed sensory capabilities that allowed them to navigate complex terrain. Dr. James Lovelock's Gaia hypothesis, proposing that the Earth functions as a self-regulating living system, gained new support from satellite data showing coordinated responses between atmospheric, oceanic, and biological systems that occurred too rapidly and precisely to be explained by simple chemical and physical feedback loops. The planet seemed to possess information processing capabilities that allowed it to maintain stability through mechanisms that approached those of living organisms. Space exploration yielded its own share of anomalies. Robotic missions to Mars detected atmospheric and geological patterns that suggested the planet retained active processes that should have ceased billions of years ago. Methane emissions varied in patterns that seemed to correlate with seasonal changes, despite the apparent absence of biological sources. The emissions followed mathematical patterns that resembled biological rhythms, raising questions about what forms of organization might persist on apparently dead worlds. Radio astronomy continued to detect signals from space that defied conventional explanation. Beyond the famous WOW signal of the 1970s, modern radio telescopes picked up transmissions that displayed characteristics of artificial origin, but came from regions of space where no technological civilizations should exist according to current models of stellar evolution and planetary formation. Dr. Sarah Chen at the SETI Institute analyzed these signals using advanced pattern recognition software, discovering mathematical structures embedded within the transmissions that resembled prime, number sequences, and geometric constants. The signals seemed to carry information encoded in ways that suggested intelligence. But the sources appeared to be locations in deep space, where conventional astronomy detected only empty void. Even more intriguing were the correlations between these space signals and terrestrial phenomena. When certain types of cosmic transmissions were detected, sensitive individuals, particularly those with documented psychic abilities, would report simultaneous experiences of expanded awareness or prophetic dreams. The correlations were statistically significant enough to warrant serious investigation, suggesting connections between human consciousness and cosmic events that transcended known physical mechanisms. Neuroscience research into these individuals revealed brain activity patterns that resembled quantum coherence states during their responsive episodes. Neural networks would synchronize in ways that should not have been possible given the classical properties of brain tissue, displaying quantum entanglement-like correlations between distant regions of the brain that activated simultaneously, despite having no direct neural connections. As the accumulation of unexplained phenomena reached critical mass, researchers began to notice striking parallels between their discoveries and knowledge systems that had been preserved in various wisdom traditions throughout history. Ancient texts from diverse cultures contained descriptions of reality that resembled the findings of quantum physics, consciousness research, and information theory more than the mechanical worldview that had dominated science for centuries. Hindu texts thousands of years old described the universe as a cosmic hologram, with each part containing the whole, a description that paralleled modern holographic theories of reality. Buddhist contemplatives had long maintained that consciousness was fundamental to existence rather than emergent from matter, a position that quantum mechanics seemed to support through its observer effect and measurement problems. Indigenous traditions worldwide had preserved knowledge of plant consciousness, animal precognition, and the informational properties of natural systems that modern science was only beginning to discover. Shamanic practices often involved states of consciousness that seemed to access the same quantum coherence effects that advanced meditation practitioners demonstrated in laboratory settings. Dr. Michael Harner, an anthropologist who had spent decades studying shamanic traditions, documented techniques for accessing expanded states of awareness that closely paralleled the conditions under which quantum consciousness effects were observed in neuroscience laboratories. The shamanic journey to non-ordinary reality seemed to involve the same neural coherence patterns that allowed access to information beyond normal sensory channels. Traditional Chinese medicine's concept of qi, long dismissed by Western science as prescientific superstition, began to find support in research into bioelectromagnetic fields and quantum effects in living systems. Acupuncture meridians corresponded to pathways of enhanced electromagnetic conductivity in the body, and the practice's effectiveness seemed to rely on quantum field effects that influenced cellular communication and healing processes. Even more, remarkably, ancient astronomical knowledge preserved in various cultures displayed accuracy that should have required advanced instrumentation. Mayan calculations of planetary cycles, Egyptian knowledge of stellar movements, and Polynesian navigation techniques all demonstrated understanding of cosmic patterns that exceeded what naked eye observation should have provided. The Great Pyramids, mathematical relationships encoded advanced knowledge of the Earth's dimensions, the speed of light, and the structure of atomic matter, information that was supposedly discovered only in the modern era. Similar knowledge appeared to be embedded in sacred architecture around the world, from Stonehenge to Angkor Wat, suggesting that ancient builders possessed understanding of physics and cosmology that had somehow been lost and was only now being rediscovered. Researchers investigating these correlations began to consider the possibility that human consciousness had access to sources of information that transcended individual sensory experience and cultural knowledge transmission. If quantum effects allowed consciousness to access non-local information, then advanced practitioners in any era might have been able to discover scientific truths about reality through contemplative investigation rather than technological measurement. This perspective suggested that the current scientific revolution, the discovery of quantum consciousness, information-based reality, and the interconnectedness of all phenomena might represent a return to ways of understanding that had been available to human consciousness throughout history, but had been obscured by the mechanical worldview that dominated recent centuries. Epilogue: the eternal dance of mystery and understanding. The night deepens around the contemplation of these mysteries. The accumulated weight of the unexplained settles into a different kind of understanding. Not the harsh clarity of solved puzzles, but the soft illumination that comes from accepting the inherent mystery at the heart of existence itself. The phenomena that science cannot yet explain point not toward gaps in knowledge that will eventually be filled, but toward the possibility that mystery and understanding are complementary aspects of reality rather than opposing forces. The quantum realm reveals that observation and the observed are fundamentally inseparable, suggesting that consciousness and cosmos participate in an eternal dance, where each partner simultaneously leads and follows. Ancient stones preserve impossible precision, while modern devices detect quantum consciousness, creating a symmetry across time that hints at patterns too vast for any single moment or perspective to encompass completely. In the gentle rhythm of breath and heartbeat, in the slow circulation of blood and the patient pulse of cellular metabolism, the same quantum coherence that orchestrates photosynthesis and guides migrating birds continues its silent work. Each moment of awareness participates in information processing systems that extend from the molecular to the cosmic, making every conscious experience a node in networks of meaning that span all scales of existence. The phenomena that remain unexplained, from the acoustic mysteries of ancient temples to the therapeutic impossibilities of distant healing, from the mathematical precision of crop circles to the synchronized emergence of breakthrough insights across separated minds, weave together into a tapestry where science and wonder complement rather than contradict each other. Perhaps the greatest mystery is not any particular unexplained phenomenon, but the capacity of consciousness itself to recognize mystery, to feel wonder, and to find profound satisfaction in questions that have no final answers. This capacity suggests that awareness and the universe it explores share a fundamental affinity, a kinship that makes scientific investigation a form of cosmic self-discovery rather than the examination of purely external objects. As sleep approaches, carrying its own mysteries of dream and restoration, the unexplained phenomena of waking life begin to seem less like problems requiring solution and more like invitations to participate in the ongoing creativity of existence itself. The boundaries between observer and observed, between mystery and understanding, between sleep and waking, soften into transitions rather than divisions. In this softening awareness, the inexplicable becomes not a source of frustration, but a reminder that reality exceeds every attempt to capture it completely. The phenomena that science cannot explain serve as windows into dimensions of existence that remain forever beyond the reach of purely analytical understanding, requiring instead the participatory awareness that recognizes itself as part of what it seeks to comprehend. The journey through history's unexplained phenomena reveals that mystery is not the absence of knowledge, but the presence of something infinitely larger than any particular understanding can contain. Each unexplained event points toward the inexhaustible depth of existence itself, suggesting that wonder is not a temporary condition to be overcome by explanation, but the appropriate response to participating in a reality that continuously exceeds every attempt to reduce it to familiar categories. As consciousness settles into sleep, carrying with it the accumulated wonder of all these mysteries, the unexplained phenomena continue their patient existence. Quantum effects persisting in the darkness of cells, electromagnetic fields dancing through the neural networks of dreams, gravitational waves from distant cosmic events washing gently through the sleeping body, connecting this moment of rest to the vast symphony of forces and phenomena that constitute the eternal mystery of existence itself. In the end, perhaps the most profound unexplained phenomenon is the capacity of consciousness to find peace within mystery itself, to rest contentedly in the midst of questions that have no final answers, discovering that wonder and understanding can coexist as harmonious aspects of awareness rather than opposing forces in the quest for knowledge. The unexplained remains unexplained not as a failure of science, but as an invitation to participate in the ongoing mystery of existence with the full depth of human consciousness, analytical and intuitive, questioning and accepting, forever, curious and eternally at peace with the inexhaustible nature of what is. Sleep comes now as another mystery, another transition into states of consciousness that science cannot fully explain, where the boundaries between individual awareness and cosmic consciousness become permeable, allowing rest and restoration through processes that remain as mysterious as the phenomena explored in waking hours. In this surrender to sleep's own unexplained gifts, consciousness completes its journey through the catalogue of mysteries, finding that the greatest mystery of all is the capacity to rest peacefully within the infinite questions that existence eternally poses to itself. It takes hours of research, writing, and quiet thought to bring stories like this to life. If you made it this far and still haven't subscribed, seriously, go on, tap it. We'll keep the lantern burning for you.